In February 1993, veterinarian Joseph Wellnitz, his wife Beth, and their son Dennis were shot to death in their home in Columbia, Kentucky. Evidence at the scene suggested that the Wellnitz family had been killed by someone close to them in a targeted hit. Detectives looked at a number of suspects, including Joseph and Beth's daughter Meg Wellnitz and her then-boyfriend Bill Meese, but no one could be linked to the crimes. Eventually, the case went cold. A decade later, Bill Meese's estranged wife Regina provided a shocking new tip. She claimed Meese had carried out the killings for Meg so she could collect a six-figure life insurance payout. The story checked out, and Meg Wellnitz and Bill Meese were arrested. Bill Meese made a plea deal, which included him giving details about how he committed the murders. Meg Wellnitz also pled guilty and was sentenced to life in prison with parole. In 2005, Bill Meese withdrew his plea, citing conflict with his attorneys, and took his case to trial. After Meg Wellnitz testifies, Meese takes the stand in his own defense.
Call Bill Meese.
Come around, Mr. Meese. Mr. Meese, please take the witness stand. Make yourself as comfortable as you can. Please speak into that microphone and speak clearly, sir, as you can. When you're ready to proceed, please state your name for the record.
My name is William Meese.
Mr. Eustace, you may inquire the client.
Bill, what's your age?
I'm 33. I'll be 34 in October.
Okay, well, easier. What's your date of birth?
18th of October, 1972.
Okay, you need to speak up a little.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I was born October 18th, 1972.
And in February of 93, that would make you
20 years old.
20 years old. Okay. Now you were born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida.
In Jackson, yes, sir.
And then you came to Lexington.
Yes, sir.
Okay, could you tell us a little bit about your life when did you come to Lexington?
The day after Christmas in 1986.
Which would make you
14.
okay. And tell us about the next few years in that regard.
When I left Florida and even in high school, I was a tall, skinny, kind of nerdy kid who, before I came to Lexington in Kentucky, I was picked on a lot because I've always worn glasses since I was like 8. And so when I came to Kentucky, I kind of reinvented myself. I'd always lived in the same neighborhood, in the same house when I lived in Florida. And so when I came to Kentucky, I was able to invent this persona and tell these really wild, crazy stories about, being in the Navy and traveling the world. And I even told high school teachers I had been to a military school in Germany. And I created that persona as a defense mechanism so that I didn't get picked on. And I never got in a fight in high school in Kentucky because people left me alone.
Were they afraid of you?
I don't really think so. I never really thought so. I think that they just kind of didn't know. I think it just pushed people away. And that's in retrospect as a, mid-30s white guy, 20 years later. But I don't think I'm a scary guy. And I never thought people were afraid of me. But I think people just didn't know how to take it. I think it was successful at pushing people away.
Okay, let's jump ahead now and tell us how you came to meet Meg and Randy.
I met Randy before I met Meg. I met Randy while I lived in Lexington, and I had gone to UK, and I had friends who were going to the University of Kentucky. And at that time, the internet was not a big thing. I had not ever heard of the internet at that time, but there was a computer, a mainframe computer, and they had a program called Phone, and it's kind of like bulletin boards are now on the internet. And I met Randy through that crowd, that computer science crowd. I played cards with him, a lot of spades and some hearts. And then, we were, I guess, just friendly. And then In the fall of 1992, I was going to Lexington Community College, which is part of UK campus in Lexington. And I met Meg because she was in one of my classes.
Were you married at that time?
I was married.
Regina.
I was married to Regina.
When did you get married?
We got married on the 10th of August of 1991, and my oldest daughter was born on the 1st of January 1992.
What's your knowledge of any involvement in any, if any, in Wicca?
I've never been involved in Wicca. At one point, I looked into Wicca as witchcraft and witches and all that. My knowledge is entirely based on just reading books, probably when I was 14 or 15, and kind of doing what teenagers do, trying to find myself and find a place I was comfortable in my faith. And, you know, Wicca is a kind of paganism and the whole magic thing, which I guess worked into, I played role-playing games in high school and a little bit in college, and Dungeons and Dragons has a magic component, and I guess I looked into it for that. But I was certainly never a practicing, I don't know what to call someone who would be into Wicca. I was never a practicing witch, for want of a better word.
Well, you mentioned gaming, and gaming's been mentioned a lot through the trial. Tell us about the gaming environment.
Role-playing games is like a big game of pretend. You can shed the person that you are and you become this other person or this other character. You literally put a character on paper based on die rolls. And
What was that?
on dice rolls.
Dice rolls.
And I got into role-playing games, especially after I came, a little bit when I was in Florida, and then especially after I came to Lexington. And I really wasn't that big into Dungeons and Dragons per se. I really, there was a game called Twilight 2000 that I really liked a lot. It was a military game based on and you have to remember this was in the early 90s. And Twilight 2000 was based on this European war in the year 2000. And how society, how the limited nuclear exchange and society sort of breaks down, and the goal is, you know, there's mission goals depending on the goals, to find things, to gather intelligence and all that sort of thing. It was a very military game, modern times, modern weapons, not a lot of fantasy, but some fantasy. You have to just change personas.
Okay, and the other people were also involved in role-playing?
Yeah, Meg and I played a little bit. My ex-wife and I played a lot in high school. I had a couple of friends named Chris and Richard who we played a lot in high school and a little bit in college. Randy played with us. Randy I think liked D&D more than Twilight 2000, but we played both. I was involved at one point with it was called the Miskatonic Student Union. It was a group of college kids at the University of Kentucky who played role-playing games, and they got together just to play role-playing games.
What is your source of knowledge regarding guns and ammunition?
I'm not stupid, and when I was a kid, and I liked this role-playing game that involved guns, so I learned everything I could about guns. I read books about it. I read crime novels and military techno novels, you know, Tom Clancy type novels. When I was smaller than that even, I used to read these books called Mac Ballin and Able Team and Phoenix Force, and there are these action adventure anti-terrorist novels. I read a lot. I read just an enormous amount. And you know, I even read field manuals, U.S. Army field manuals and Soviet Army field manuals that have been translated. And like other, I guess, some kids, and I knew them growing up, was just fascinated with airplanes or fascinated with cars. I was just kind of fascinated with guns. I learned everything I could about them, but it was entirely book knowledge.
What caused you to talk about guns so much?
I think looking back on it, it's hard. I realize now as an adult how strange it must have seemed to absolutely everyone at the time. I think it was a way to push people away. I think it was a defense mechanism as a way to keep distance between me and people, and to keep people off balance and keep people from getting close.
How many handguns have you owned personally in your life?
I have personally owned 6 firearms, and I know where all of them were bought.
Okay. First one was a
Browning High Power, purchased at Sports Unlimited in 1993. That's the one that's been discussed here.
okay. Was that your own personal weapon?
No, I bought it through Meg, and then I bought it for a guy. There was a guy I worked with at rallies, and he had somebody who wanted this gun, and he was willing to pay me an extra $100 and $150. I don't remember exactly how much, to buy this gun for him, because I talked about guns a lot to everybody. And I was working literally at rallies, and I was going to college full time. I needed the money, and so I made that purchase. I went shooting with it twice. Once the night that we bought it, and once the Saturday that's been discussed here. And then about a week later, I sold the gun. And then since then, I've owned 5 handguns.
Were any of them Browning High Power?
No.
What was the next one?
In February of 1994, after I got my tax money in, the year that I turned 21, I bought a 6-hour 228 9mm handgun. It's a compact.
Is that the one that Katie was talking about?
Yeah, that's the one that Katie fired.
Okay. What happened to that gun?
That gun was stolen from me that October 1994 by my ex-wife's cousin after my ex-wife left her alone in our apartment.
What was next?
I bought Woodhill, where I lived in 1994. Woodhill was not a nice neighborhood. It's a real rough area.
Is this the same place that
Katie came and visited? Yes.
No, now let me get
I'm sorry.
question. Is this the same place that Bob was describing to the jury?
Yes.
Okay.
I think he understated it. And,
Okay, go ahead.
Woodhill's like a real high Section 8 area, and there's a lot of drug deals that go on there. And it was a rough neighborhood. And after I started teaching my ex-wife how to shoot with this SIG 228, she got to like it a lot because it fit well in her hand, and it's a medium power handgun. And so I was leaving it more and more at home for her. And then so later in 1994, I bought a Glock 23, which is a 40 caliber Glock from Kaiser's Gun Shop in Paris, Kentucky, where there's also a indoor gun range. I didn't find out about that indoor gun range until 1994, but there's a gun shop attached, and that was a used 40 caliber, and it was stolen from me later that year, from work.
What about the Glock 19? Where did that go?
I probably a couple of years later, I was working for a place called Lexington Exterminating, and I had a guy that I did work for offer to sell me a Glock 19 for $250. It's the same size as the Glock 23 40 caliber, but it's a 9mm. At that time, it was the standard sidearm for the Lexington Police Department, I believe. And it was a good deal on it, and I bought it from this guy who lived in an apartment off Rosedale Road for $250, and I kept it for about, I guess, 4 or 5 months. And then I sold it to a guy that was a friend of a friend that worked for the Scott County Fire Department.
Next gun.
I know it kind of sounds strange because I do a lot of these guns are bought just kind of informally, bought and traded and sold. But I wasn't making a whole lot of money, and if I could make $100 on a gun, then I usually did. There was a little black kid who come to work for us at Little Lexington Exterminating. And he had a FM high power compact, which is an Argentine copy of a Browning high power, except it's got a shorter barrel inside. And he offered it to me for like $100. It's like a $200 gun new, and he offered it to me for like $100. with a spare magazine and 2 boxes of Winchester ball ammunition. And I was kind of shaky about it, and I called the Lexington Police Department, and I checked out the serial number to make sure it wasn't stolen, because I was kind of shaky about it. I didn't feel real good about it. And the Lexington Police Department said no, it hadn't been reported stolen. There was no problem with the gun. I bought the gun. It was later stolen from my divorce attorney's office in 2000 after I got divorced.
Last one?
When I started driving a cab in Lexington, I got a concealed carry permit for handguns. Driving a cab, even in Lexington, is not a safe occupation per se. And I went and I bought a real small little Kel-Tec P11. It's a 10-shot 9mm, double action only, no external hammer. It was a good pocket gun. I bought that from Evans Archery in Lexington on Southland Drive. And that gun was later stolen when I was robbed at gunpoint driving a cab.
Was there ever any agreement between you and anybody to kill anybody?
No.
Did he ever pay you any money?
No.
You did receive items from the wellness property, correct?
I received when we went down and helped Meg go through things and sort through things, we did get some items. I got a couple of coats that she wanted me to have that used to be Dennis's. I actually didn't get a stereo out of the house, but what I got was Meg brought the stereo out of the house to Lexington and gave me her old stereo. And back then I didn't have a CD player. I only had a twin cassette player, and hers had a twin cassette player and a CD player and a record player, and I kept that from 1993 until I got divorced. I left at the house after the divorce.
You were able to use their vehicle.
There was nothing sinister. We used their van for about a month. At the time we had a 1984 Dodge Omni. And
What year was this, man?
this was 1993.
Okay.
This was the spring of 93. And we worked at Burger King on New Circle Road at one point, and at that particular time I was working for Burger King on New Circle Road, and we let the shade tree mechanic that worked at the Shell next door replace the valve cover gasket. When he did, he didn't hook up some fuel hose, and it caused a fire in the engine compartment of the car. And while my father-in-law was fixing the car for us, Meg let us borrow their van, let us borrow the family van, the Dodge van.
There was talk of a gun purchased at Kaiser's. That's the Glock
That's the Glock 23 that I bought at Kaiser's gun shop.
that Regina was with you at the time?
Regina was aware of the purchase. I bought it through a finance company called American General. And I couldn't, the finance company wanted both of our signatures. So what happened was that I filled out a loan application one night when I was down there shooting with a friend of mine named John. And then the next day Gina came up to Paris with me, and we finished out the loan application. They cut us a check for the gun. And so Gina was aware that the gun was bought at Kaiser's.
There's a lot of talk about federal hypershock. Now, let me back up. Let's talk about the purchase of the gun at Sports Unlimited. Who did you buy that for?
I don't remember his name now, honestly. There was a guy that worked with me at Rowley's on Georgetown Street that came to me, and Georgetown Street in Lexington is a very high crime neighborhood. And I bought it as a third party purchase. And, I understand that's probably, if it's not illegal, it's certainly on the edge of illegality, especially having Meg buy it with a false ID. But I was pretty broke and I needed the money.
You weren't 21 then, right?
I was not 21. I could not.
Why did you tell everybody that you were buying the gun from the guy instead of selling it?
I just reversed the story. I reversed the story because I didn't want to tell anybody that I was buying this gun or that I had bought this gun, because I clearly couldn't buy a handgun legally at 20 years old. So I just reversed the story.
What's the difference between Hydra Shops and USA ammo?
Hydra shots are a type of hollow point, which is a self-defense round. It's designed to expand. It's what I'm sure the state policemen here today have in their weapons. And it's what most people who buy a handgun for self-defense load for self-defense. USA ammunition, which I understand now is a Winchester generic, is a ball type round. It's a full metal jacket. And it's good for, it's a lighter weight bullet. That's where the grains come in. It's a lighter weight bullet. And it's good for target shooting, and shooting at cans and shooting at bottles and shooting at paper targets.
When you bought ammunition with that, when you were there with Meg, what did you buy?
I bought, the night we bought the gun, I bought 2 boxes of what there was their cheapest ammunition, which was the USA ball ammunition. And later that week we went back and we bought 9 more boxes.
Buy any Hydra Shop?
No.
Did you give information to the police about Hydra Shop?
I don't believe, you mean in my statements later on?
Whenever.
Yeah, later on after I had seen the discovery in 2004, I think I said something about buying at Walmart.
Did you ever buy Hydra Shops?
No.
On the day, the 25th, Megan's testified that you two were in Lexington and got stuck in the snow. When was that?
Thursday night.
Thursday night.
And
Well, let's start toward the end when you were playing cards that night.
we were playing cards that night.
You, Randy, Meg, and Regina.
Me, Randy, Meg, and Regina.
Randy left at about what time?
I've seen the discovery that at the time we said about 1 o'clock, but that couldn't have been right because at 1 o'clock Meg was on the phone long distance to Allen. And if you do the math, it was probably closer to like 11 or 11:30 that
Which
he
is
left.
what he testified.
I believe so.
Okay. So he leaves, and then what happens next?
He left. Meg and I were going to study for an English exam we had the following Tuesday. We were in a class together on Tuesday, Thursdays. I went to school Tuesday, Thursdays, and I worked Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturdays. And Randy left. Meg and I were going to study. My wife went upstairs to go to bed. After probably half an hour, Meg decided she wanted to go run some errands. She had to feed her cats and some other stuff that she wanted to do. And so I went upstairs and I told my wife that we were going to go and run some errands and get some coffee. And we left at that point and went to her apartment on Duke Road, which Duke Road is down in the middle of Lexington. It's near campus. It's a nicer neighborhood. It's much upper class neighborhood than where I was living. And so it's about a 3-mile drive. And we drove to her apartment on Duke Road. And the time they're talking about that I was with her that we got stuck was getting into her parking lot of her apartment building on Duke Road. We got stuck in the ice and the snow because I'm not sure if her car was front or rear wheel drive, but it was a little Nissan and it didn't do well at all in the snow.
Yeah. And you were helped by.
There was a couple guys that lived either in that building or the building next to it who came up and helped. I was out trying to put traction behind the tires, and they helped just. We ended up muscling her car into the parking lot, just pushing it up into the parking lot.
Okay, while you were there, she made phone calls that she testified to.
She called Alan. Her apartment was 2 stories. The bedroom was upstairs, and there was a circular stairway. And then there was the downstairs. And she said she needed to make some phone calls, and so she went upstairs alone. And I watched TV downstairs, and I found out later she called Alan long distance.
Okay, this is the one that, according to the evidence shows, ended at 118 Central.
1:18 Central Time, but Lexington's on Eastern Time, so Lexington would have been 2:18.
Okay. After that one?
She came downstairs and said that, she was ready to go, and so we went from there to BP on Richmond Road, which is on the way to my house. It was about a quarter mile from my house. She had a BP gas car. That was her grandmother's. It's what she used to fill up her car. And from there, we went to, there's a Denny's and a Perkins within like an eighth of a mile of each other. There's a Perkins right in front of Lexington Mall, right behind that BP. And there's a Denny's up on the corner of Woodhill Drive. It's walking distance, easy walking distance. And those were one of the two places we would go for coffee and breakfast. And we went and had coffee and maybe something small to eat. I don't recall exactly. I know we had coffee.
The BP, that's the BP charge card that's in evidence?
Yes. Yes.
228 East.
I believe so.
After that, where'd you go?
After we went to I'm thinking we went to Denny's. I don't think we went to Perkins.
Whatever.
We went back to my house and we made coffee and sat up studying. I believe Emily Dickinson. It was a literature class. It was an English 252 class that we had to test on the following week. And then eventually, probably about 5:30 or so, she fell asleep. And then about 6:30 or so, I woke her up and sent her, I guess, to Randy's at this point. I told her to go home, but she went and stayed and slept over at Randy's house.
Okay. Were you, during that period of time, were you able to drive a stick shift?
No.
When you learned, have you since learned?
I've since learned. My ex-wife tried to teach me, back then she was my wife. My ex-wife tried to teach me before we got married on her, she had a little Subaru GL, and I just couldn't get it. I know that sounds stupid for someone who's not dumb, but I just couldn't get it. I didn't learn really how to drive a stick shift until January of 1995 after I worked for Kinlawn. I worked for a company called National Lawn Care, and they had a Nissan pickup with a stick, and it was the only truck they had, so I had to learn how to drive it.
Did you get a license when you were first eligible to get one?
No, I didn't get a license until sometime after Becky was born, sometime in 1992.
92.
Yeah.
What vehicles amongst your group had stick shifts? Well, no, let me change it. What ones had automatic?
Our car was a Dodge Omni. It was an automatic. The car we owned before that was a Ford Escort. It was an automatic.
Okay, no, at that time.
Okay, I'm sorry. Meg's car was a Nissan Sentra. It was a stick shift. And Randy's car was a Dodge Shadow. It was a stick shift because he liked to drive real fast. It was a little compact Dodge Shadow, but it was the sport version, and it was he liked it.
For a period of time following the deaths of the Wellnitses, well, just generally, very briefly, tell us what your lifestyle was financially and where you were living.
In 1993, I lived not quite in Woodhill. I lived on the edge of Woodhill in a little bit nicer apartment complex called Outside Farm Apartments. That's where Mr. Wheat talked to my wife when she went to court. And it was a 2-bedroom apartment. Becky had her own room, and we had our own room upstairs. It was like a townhouse.
What kind of income did you have?
I was going to school full time at Lexington Community College, and I was working probably for Rally's or Burger King at that time. I don't remember which. I was working as an assistant manager at fast food, making less than $7 an hour. Right, they made $6 or $6.50.
You had how many children at that point?
I had a pregnant wife and one child.
Was she working?
No, she wasn't. Tori was born later that, in 1993, Tori was born in July of 93.
Did you ever come into any significant amount of money?
No. The most money I ever came into was from tax money, and it was, $1,000 a year, $2,000 a year.
We heard a lot about this letter that you supposedly an extortion letter that was you sent to Meg. Tell us about that.
It wasn't an extortion letter. In 1998, was trying to get a business off the ground. I had worked for Kimlon, both in sales and in production. In production meaning I went out and I sprayed grass with chemicals to kill the weeds and make the grass green. Just simplifying it. And then I worked for a couple of other companies. And starting in 1996, I, based out of my car, not even a truck at that point yet, in a backpack sprayer, I started doing, I got my own chemical license, I got my own business license, and I had this company that I was kind of building up off the ground, and I did it as a side affair. I was working as an exterminator, and I did it as a sideline. And as I built it up and I could afford to get a truck, I got a truck, and then I wrote Meg in, I think it was 1998, because I was living on Forest Avenue, and I basically wanted to see if I could get her to invest in my company and let me pay her back for that investment. And it wasn't an extortion letter, it was more of a, this was before I knew the state police had been going around behind my back telling everybody I killed people or killed my family. And my mom has been in the audience, I believe, this entire trial. And so I wrote her this letter and I said, can I get you to invest in my company? And I was talking like $20,000 maybe, or even $10,000. I was looking for money for a bigger truck and to be able to pay for advertising. And it was certainly not an extortion letter.
Meg said something to the effect that you had problems because of her.
I felt that some of the problems that I had at some of my workplaces were a result of my involvement with Meg and the state police.
And did you put that in the letter?
I said something to that effect. I don't remember the exact words.
Let's talk about you and Regina. How long were you actually married?
My marriage.
Okay, let's put it this way. When were you married?
We got married on the 10th of August of 1991.
Separated when?
Christmas Eve, 1999.
And not. Divorced?
This was finalized the 28th of November 2000.
2000. Did you two have an open marriage?
We had an open relationship when we were dating. We closed it when we got married. Gina reopened it. Yes, we had an open marriage.
So she did have sexual partners during your marriage?
Yes.
And you did too?
Yes.
When things started getting bad, what did she do to you?
On the 8th of December 1999, everything was fine in my marriage, and my wife told me she loved me. On the 9th of December 1999, my wife asked me if I could move out by Christmas. She had met someone else who had promised to marry her, and she wanted a divorce. And so I was real adamant about not moving out of the house, at least until sometime after Becky's birthday, which would have been in January, because I did not want my daughters and my children to remember Christmas, or in Becky's case, her birthday, as the time that Daddy left. And so, from like the 9th of December until Christmas Eve, I would go to work at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and or 6 or later. I guess by that time I was working later in the evening. I would go to work after Gina got home from between 3 and 6, and Gina would come, and I would go to work, and then when I came back, Gina would go and spend the night with Daryl McFarland, her boyfriend, at some hotel or somewhere else. And then, so we really only saw each other in a very short period of time in passing. But when I was working, she watched the kids, and when she was working, I watched the kids. And then on the 24th of December, my ex-wife offered sex offered to have sex with me in a roll in the hay, and used that opportunity with her boyfriend Daryl McFarland to call the police and claim that I raped her. That resulted in my arrest. Those charges were later dismissed.
Before trial.
Yeah, they the grand jury did not indict me for rape. They indicted me on a misdemeanor. So I went from a B felony, 20-year misdemeanor felony, to I guess it was called sexual misconduct, which was
That never went to trial. That was dismissed.
that never went to trial. It was later amended down to a lesser misdemeanor, and that was dismissed by the county attorney.
Without saying what he said.
Without saying what that person said, it was dismissed by the county attorney the day of trial.
Okay. We've heard evidence about $100. What's that about?
I'm not very proud of that. In the summer of 2001,
This is after you divorced him.
this was after my divorce. This was after we had a mediation agreement. I was living with my kids half the time, and Regina had the kids half the time. And I still had feelings for Regina, probably still do. And Regina had been asking me about money for some medical bills, and I was paying for insurance at that point. So I told her that I would get to it. She kept bugging me about it, and I made some joke, probably snide comment that I would give her $100 for a floor show and a good time, and that ended up turning into $30 for a floor show and $120 for sex. And I had a moment with Regina, and then later, between that time and afterwards, my drinking got real bad. I was a pretty dedicated drunk, and pretty much every time I talked to her, Regina hurt me real bad, and I lashed back at her real bad, and I would say things like, "What do you do for $100?" And it wasn't a nice comment, but I said it a lot.
It was meant nasty.
It was meant nasty.
Did you also make any kind of complaints about regarding your children?
In October of 2002, like I said, my drinking was real bad. It had gotten to the worst. And her boyfriend, Daryl McFarland, was spending a lot of time with my oldest daughter. And he, it made me uncomfortable because he was spending a lot of time alone with my oldest daughter at his house. Regina and Daryl didn't live together. And she was spending a lot of time with Daryl alone at his house, and I just didn't think that was proper.
She being Becky.
She being Becky, my oldest daughter.
Okay, go ahead.
And it smelled fishy, and so I called the Lexington Police Department a couple of times. I called Child Protective Services a couple of times. There's a child abuse hotline that's in a phone book. It's a statewide child abuse hotline, and I called them a couple of times, and pretty much nobody was interested. And later on, I found out that there had been some allegations and some charges in May of 2003. Okay.
That doesn't matter.
Okay.
We're talking about what you did.
Okay. I'm sorry.
And these were against,
They-
aimed at
They were
Regina.
at Regina, but they were aimed at Daryl and Regina. I had made some allegations against Regina earlier than that because Regina wasn't giving my younger daughter, Tori, who had asthma and ADD and was on Adderall, and she had a daily asthma treatment, and she wasn't getting her medication, and Child Protective Services got involved on that, and then somehow they talked to her, and I guess Tori started getting her medicine again, and then they came and they talked to me real briefly.
Continuing on these attacks against Regina. Rick, what
letter.
Who's Greg?
I wrote that letter after I got out of jail in January of 2000. Greg was a friend of ours, or a friend of ours. He was a friend of our roommate Mike. He was 15 when Gina was 27, so I would have been 25. And he developed a real crush on Gina, and Gina later became sexually involved with Greg, both when he was 15 and after he turned 16. And after she had me thrown in jail, out of pure, I'm not proud of it, but out of revenge, I wrote Greg, I guess it was either 16 or 17 at the time, a letter after I got out of jail in 2000 and said basically that he should take advantage of the position of power that Regina had put him in, that Regina had committed a felony, child abuse, sex abuse, and that there was no statute of limitations on felonies, and that he should certainly take advantage of her to the fullest extent possible. I'm not sure what resulted from that letter. I know that as part of the divorce, Gina told me that she was aware of that letter.
After your divorce, how were your relationships with Regina's parents? We heard some from Bob, but he wasn't. Go.
I would like to think we had a very tactful and polite relationship. I never had a problem with Gina's mom. Gina's dad was very understanding. I took my kids, when I had my children for their birthdays, like Tori's birthday in July and Eli's birthday in October, I was over there for at least one Christmas, and for Becky's birthday. I believe I was over there at Thanksgiving. And, I would bring the kids and we would all, that would have been our tradition. Let me clarify that. Our tradition when my kids were growing up was that we spent Thanksgiving and Christmas with Gina's parents. My mom didn't live in Kentucky, and these were the only grandparents they had. And so Gina's brother and sister-in-law would come in from Louisville, and sometimes her Uncle Mike, and we would all get together for this family Christmas and this family Thanksgiving. And after we got divorced, I was invited to do birthdays and to do Thanksgiving and Christmas. And sometimes I brought a girlfriend, and Gina was there every time, and her parents never had a problem with me being there.
The safe, that safe that's next to you there.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever buy a safe like that?
Yes, sir.
When did you buy a safe?
That would have been when I was living in Woodhill. Right after we moved to Woodhill, it would have been the fall of 1993.
There's also talk about an 1100 safe. Do you know what that is?
It's a much smaller safe. I guess I'll just lean over.
This safe is like twice the height, and so if you cut it off in half, and then maybe 2/3 the size this way.
It's a smaller safe.
It's a much smaller safe.
And you purchased that too?
I bought that at Walmart on Richmond Road as well.
Let's talk about Katie Felice.
Okay.
His testimony that you talked to Andy and that you thought she was KSP. When did you come to that conclusion?
She started working with me at King One, I guess in February
Of what year?
1994.
Okay.
And it was pretty quickly that I thought that it was pretty quickly that I wasn't comfortable with Katie Felice. I knew her as Shauna, I guess Norman. Later on I called her Shauna Williams because I forgot her last name. But when she showed up the first day that she came to my house, and we started working together with makeup on her eye, and claimed that she had had black eye that hurt. She had some, when she showed up here, she's gained a lot of weight and she's gotten older. At the time, she was very skinny and came across as a biker chick, and wore real tight jeans and real revealing tops, and these like short jackets. And the first day she showed up to work, she showed up with this makeup on her eye, claimed that her husband had given her a black eye, and this song and dance, and always wanted to talk about you know, how to set up alibis and you know, talking about her abusive husband and how to get rid of her abusive husband. And she, you know, she was shaky. She just, I didn't feel real comfortable with her.
We heard a lot of things that she recorded that you said to her.
I did. I said a lot of things, most of the time as part of larger conversations that were as much initiated by her as by me. And I talked some crazy, stupid stuff about vampires. I'm a real big Anne Rice fan, and I've read Anne Rice novels. And I talked some crazy stuff.
You specifically talked about alibis, too.
I did. She asked me how to set up an alibi if she killed her husband. And I believe that was right at the end of that period of time, and she made me real uncomfortable. I figured she was either an undercover state police officer or she was crazy and she wanted me to kill her husband. And either way, and I told Andy Forbes, quote, "And either way, I don't want nothing to do with it." And so, I mean, literally, as soon as the conversation in Jacobson Park happened, I called Andy Forbes that day and talked to him that evening, and then went and made a phone call to her the next day. After I had gone to work, I called her the next day from the basement of the police department, where they wanted me to be a confidential informant, and I didn't call the police as Carl Messenbow or whatever. Andy Forbes suggested to me that on their records I should have I should do that under an alias instead of my real name, and that's where Carl Messenbow came from. And I gave them willingly my fingerprints, and they paid me like $20 to be a confidential informant. And I told my boss at the same day that Jacobson, I went to work. After I talked to Andy Forbes, I went to work, and I approached my sales manager. His name was next Marine, and I said, you know, Sean has been saying some real crazy things, and I'm not real comfortable with it. I went to the police this afternoon. That's why I was late to work. And they want me to ask you for her social security number and her date of birth. And if you don't want to give them to me, here's Andy Forbes' card. You can call him. And then the next day is when I was told that Shauna had been fired. I'm sorry, Katie Felix had been fired.
During the conversations you had with her, you talked about the smell of cordite and blood. How do you know about the smell of cordite?
That came straight out of some book. And cordite's basically one of the materials in the gunpowder of a bullet. So if you go shooting, and I did a lot of target shooting, I like to sport shoot, you smell it a lot. And that's where the smell of cordite comes from.
Smell of blood?
I don't know. I was present for the birth of all three of my children, and that's the closest I've ever come.
Do you hunt?
No.
Did you ever hunt?
No.
Did you ever kill an animal?
No.
You talked about 124 grains.
It's 24 grain hollow point, which back then was the standard NATO round, and the standard hollow point round back in the early 90s was 124 grain hollow point. That was just at the beginning when the 147 grain hollow point, which is now more common, came out.
How did you know that?
I read a lot of gun magazines. I mean, Guns and Ammo and Combat Handgun, and I got some of them from my father-in-law. At one point, he was even getting, I think he was getting Guns and Ammo. I was buying Combat Handgun. It's a monthly magazine. And, you know, I don't want to use the word obsessed because I think that overstates it, but I was pretty interested. It was my hobby. Especially after I bought the SIG. I did a lot of target shooting that summer with the SIG and the Glock in '94.
We'll be getting into your statements and your guilty plea and your withdrawal of guilty plea. But let's talk about the statement just a little bit. There were timelines that you discussed in those statements. Where did those timelines come from?
Those timelines came from discovery and trying to figure out. I had to make it fit. I made up this story to make it fit into the discovery, and the timeline that I made up was an effort to fit it into the discovery. All the statements that were in discovery and all the police reports. And clearly I was in Lexington at least until 2:30. So the earliest I could have been in Columbia was 4:30. And that was before I understood there was a weather problem. And so I kind of just tried to fit the timeline into what I knew about the discovery.
This was in 2000.
That was in 2004.
So you had forgotten about the ice and the snow?
I hadn't forgotten it. I had not really just incorporated it. I didn't. At the time I originally made those statements, I was more focused on defending this case and trying to prove that I was innocent, which is extremely hard to do and next to impossible. But I didn't kill these people, and I thought I should focus on that, not on some story. And so I ended up making up this story and then following it up.
How did you come up with the 2-hour trip?
Mr. Bingfield, who's standing behind you, or sitting behind you, in Discovery, in I believe 2002, drove the route from Lexington to Columbia. That was the same way that Randy drove the night before the murders, and they said that it took them from like 2:30 in the morning on clear roads. Took them 2 hours and a minute from the BP station in Lexington to Conover Lane in Columbia.
Is that the basis of the timeline?
That's the basis of the timeline.
KSP learned about a Browning high power at Sports Unlimited in 2004, right?
Yes, they did.
How did they find out about it?
In 2004, I was represented by a different set of lawyers, and those lawyers' names were Betty Mimi and Melissa Blue. Melissa Blue wasn't very involved in my case for most of it. In January of 2004, I told my attorney, my appointed attorney, Betty Mimi, about a Browning high power that we had bought from Sports Unlimited, and then she told the state police as part of the plea negotiations.
And that's when they first learned about it?
And that's when we first learned that that gun was bought at Sports Unlimited. That's not the murder weapon, however.
That's the one
That's the one that I bought for the guy at Raleigh, and I think the physical evidence is pretty clear the murder weapon was an Enrico Torgoff, and not that weapon.
Okay. Dealing with your guilty plea that you entered, did you have much legal knowledge at that point?
Clearly not enough, but I had some. A little bit of knowledge of law is a very dangerous thing. I had been able to do some legal research and had been able to look some stuff up, and it was my understanding and my belief, based on my research, that guilty plea and all the statements made as part of that guilty plea would never be heard by a jury, that those were never going to be able to be used as evidence against me.
What was your relationship with your appointed attorney?
Betty, Mimi, and I had more than one screaming argument with each other. We had one screaming argument in the Adair County, Columbia, Kentucky courthouse after a hearing. We didn't get along. We had some very deep, serious issues over control and over what the defense was going to be or not going to be, and whether or not she was preparing, and witnesses and evidence.
What did you do as a result of your conflict with that?
I spent about 6 months in 2004 begging for Betty's attention. I wrote a lot of letters begging for Betty's attention and get her to find out information, including like the USA head stamps, that we still don't know what the head stamp for USA and all is. And in July of 1994, I started filing motions with the court. I'm not a lawyer, but I was asking to.
When was that?
July. I guess the first motion was probably filed like
What year? July of...
July of 2004.
Okay, go
It was about 4 months or 5 months before the trial. It was set to start in November of 2004. And I had some real communication and control issues. And then I filed a motion to remove Betty Mimi. Right behind that, and later on filed, I guess, 2 other motions to remove Betty Mimi and the DPA.
DPA is,
Department of Public Advocacy, they're court-appointed lawyers.
I am DPA.
Yes, sir, you are. And between the time that I filed my first motion on communication control and my second motion, which was to remove Betty Mimi, and the time that I took my guilty plea, I filed 29 motions with the court. My motion to withdraw my guilty plea was my 30th motion to the court. I didn't feel she was representing me, so I felt I had to.
After Betty Mimi, I was appointed, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you still continue to file motions?
Yes, sir.
We filed over 100, haven't we?
I believe I'm somewhere in the 120s or 130s.
And to very briefly, you obtained permission to the court to actually be part of the defense team,
Yes, I did.
not to replace us, but to be part.
Not to replace you, but to be part of. I felt it was necessary, including this trial.
You didn't trust us, did you?
I still don't.
Okay. What was your rationale for entering your guilty?
I made what was the best of bad decisions. Going into trial, in the day that I pled guilty in Columbia, we were going into general voir dire, which is where, in our case, this time, everybody sat in the chairs. We never got that far. And I really felt that there was no way I was going to get a fair trial, and that there was no way that Betty Mimi was prepared to deal with like Katie Felice, and that we didn't have evidence and witnesses lined up that we absolutely had to have at that time. And I just, I figured I was screwed, just bluntly. And that and I was told, literally, that if I didn't plead guilty, then I was going to death row.
Was there anything else that was involved in your pleading regarding your children?
Well, there is a written plea agreement that was signed on the 15th of November. Outside of that written plea agreement, I had not seen my children since basically Halloween of 2002. My oldest daughter came to see me twice in the spring of 2003. My son came to see me once. And I had not seen Eli since the spring of 2000. Eli's my son. He was 6 when I got arrested. And my youngest daughter is Tori, and my oldest daughter is Becky. And I had not seen Eli since the spring of 2003, and I had not seen Tori since Halloween when they came to my house to trick or treat in 2002. And so as part of the plea deal, I insisted and got an agreement that I would get an extended visit with my children. All 3 of my children would come to see me, and it would be a private visit, and it would be a contact visit, meaning that I could hug them and I could kiss them and I could tell them that I loved them for basic, especially with Tori. I hadn't seen Tori at that point for more than 2 years.
Your Honor, Mr. Wright wants to approach regarding the next issue.
Come to the bench, gentlemen.
Mr. Hughes has handed me a copy of the letter that I assume he's wanting to introduce to this witness. It would be our position that this is hearsay.
It obviously is, Mr. Eustace.
Sorry, sir.
That's your say.
That letter was given to him during the course of the negotiations. It was presented to him. He saw it. He can verify that that is the letter that was presented to him during the negotiations to confirm that he would be able to see his children, and it spells out the details of what that would be. It was handed to him during the negotiations.
Who handed it to him?
It says right up there, given to D. See it?
By who?
Copy.
Who handed it to him?
His lawyer.
Which lawyer?
Which lawyer? Melissa
Tell your
Blue.
client to be quiet, please.
Melissa Blue.
This is not from Mr. Blue. Mr. Captain's the man who'll have to testify to this, sir.
No, we're not. We were only presenting that to show that there was an agreement regarding the children, and that he will verify that those
What did
agreements.
the Commonwealth agree to? Where is it at?
It's not,
Where's the plea bargain agreement?
it's not in it. That's the whole point,
What do you mean? Well, that's the agreement. This is not admissible.
sir.
Get tendered and refused by the court, please. Next question.
Avowal later.
Later.
Your Honor, may I have a moment with my attorney?
You're on the witness stand, sir.
Thank
You'll
you.
answer the questions at this time, please.
During the, without using the words that were said to you, the specific words, what was your understanding regarding what needed to be said in court regarding the agreement?
It was my understanding that I had to, under oath, say that there was no other agreement beyond what was written down in the plea agreement.
Was anything regarding the children in that written agreement that was with the court?
No, it wasn't. And in my statement in December of '04, which has been played for the jury, I made it very clear to Mr. Wright that if I didn't get my visit with my kids, that there was going to be no appeal, and he was fully aware of that. And the only reason I talked to him in December of '04, after they surprised me, because I wasn't expecting that visit or that interview, was so that I could get my visit. Which
When did you eventually get a visit with your children?
My children came up to see me the 21st of December 2004, which was the day that I had filed the already typed out motion to withdraw my plea. I'm not real proud of that, but that was how it was necessary for me to get to see my kids. And that was the last time I got to see my kids since I haven't talked to my oldest daughter since February of 2005. At that time, Tori wouldn't talk to me, and Eli wasn't at my father-in-law's house. Bob Mead, who testified, would let me call. And if the kids were there, I could talk to them. And the last time I got to talk to them before he refused to take my calls was February of '05.
Was that Marcus?
I don't know if it was or not. You'll have to ask the clerk, please.
I guess it should be. It should have been. I should have marked it first.
It would be defendant's number 7. Number 7, yes.
I now have two letters that I if you want. This is joint exhibit 8.
Gentlemen, is there any objection?
I don't believe so, John.
All right, they'll be marked in as number 8.
8-1 and 8-2.
All right, number 8, 1, 2, please.
These are two letters written from you to Mr. Paul Guthrie. Who's Paul Guthrie?
Paul Guthrie was Meg's lawyer that her grandmother had hired for her.
Okay, and they were written in November and December.
They were written in November and December of 2004.
Are those the letters that you wrote
Those are photocopies of the letters I wrote
to Mr. Guthrie,
to Mr. Guthrie,
advising him of what you were doing?
advising him what I was doing. The first one was written on the 17th of November after I took my plea on the 15th, and the second one was written on the 2nd of December 2004.
Can you approach, please? We got a problem.
Get the top part elided, where it says he's in Eastern. I didn't realize it till just now. Can I get rid of, can I cover that over? I think so. That's the letter.
I know.
Yeah. You've offered the letter, Mr.
Yes, sir. I'm asking that I offer, I'm offering it now,
Perhaps he
offering
wants to inquire about it.
the letter.
Perhaps he wants to inquire into the circumstances of the letter. I don't know. Is he not entitled to ask where it was written from?
He could say from jail, but
He's
not.
No, you're punching them doors open pretty wide, Mr. Eustace. You're putting them open pretty wide.
Okay, so let me, for the record, formally move that portion of the letter that identifies him as being in the correctional complex be elided.
Well, I'll defer ruling on your motion until this testimony is over and the Commonwealth commences and does its cross-examination.
Very well.
All right,
That's good.
all I'll do. We'll just hold
Okay.
on to it until that time.
Thank you.
I'll get back to you. They can be marked. They can be marked.
In your statement that you made pursuant to the pretrial agreement, you spoke about there being pocket doors in that building, in that house.
Yes.
How did you know that there were pocket doors?
I had been to the house the night before the murders and twice after the murders, and the pocket doors, I don't remember who brought them to my attention, but somebody brought them to my attention, and it was a really unique architectural feature. It was different, strange. It might have even been Regina, but I don't remember.
When you spoke about the times after, were those the times when you were helping?
We only went down twice to help Meg move. One night I went down by myself, and once, the second time that I went down with them, Regina was with me, and I think Regina went down a couple times to help her when I was at work. I'm not sure.
There was brought up to you after you made one of the statements, the fact that the trajectories of bullets didn't match your story. How did that happen?
I got it wrong. I got it real wrong. Before I made those statements, I had not seen the crime scene video that we saw at trial, and I had not seen the photographs of the crime scene. Those were things that Betty Amy would not provide me and refused to provide me. And I had copies of those diagrams, the diagram that's sitting right there, and I kind of improvised it, and I was just trying to make a good story, something that I could sell to Brian Wright to get him to bite on this plea agreement that I had no intention of keeping, so that I could get rid of Betty Amy and hopefully get a fair trial. And so I created, for me, it was like a role-playing game in retrospect, because I had nothing to do with these murders, and I had to create a story based on what I had seen in Discovery. And the way that they had him laying, I thought he was laying face up, which would have made it so that I would have had to been shooting from the left side of the house, from front to back. And Roy Weed brought up the 15th of December that I got wrong, because I didn't realize based on that diagram that there were bullet holes in the left side of the house. The bullet holes in the hut, it's not in this diagram. There's another diagram that shows the hutch that has a bullet hole in it and the chair that has a bullet hole in it. I basically had put myself in front of those areas with those areas to my back because I got it wrong.
And the shell casings were where?
There's a separate diagram that I hadn't really studied, and I hadn't even thought about it. And honestly, I didn't figure it out until about a week before this trial. The shell casings in the actual physical evidence are in the kitchen and in the dining room. Whereas
Is that opposite from where you were standing? You said you were standing?
that would be opposite of where I said I was standing. The trajectories that are in the physical evidence come from the bathroom through the den to where I told the police where I was standing. And all of the casings, most guns eject to the right. So because I hadn't looked at the casings, where the casings were, if I had been standing at, I guess, the doorway between the den and the office, all of those casings would have ended up where the black square is on this diagram that's out here. And they would have, and I guess that's the wood stove,
Yeah, but that's not, they weren't there.
but they weren't
They
there.
were on the other side.
They were in the kitchen and in the dining room underneath the stuff.
And there's talk about 16 rounds versus 17 rounds. Did you have a conversation with a Louisville police officer named Del Jones?
He's a Lexington police officer. Yes.
Lexington, I'm sorry.
And that was on the 16th of March of 1993.
And how many, without going into any detail, how many rounds did you tell him there were?
16.
How many rounds did you tell in your statement?
I had already seen the discovery and figured out that I got it wrong and that there were 17 shots fired. So I had to come up with a story to explain the 17 shots, and I did.
Okay. Were you there on that Thursday night?
No, I was not.
Did you kill Joe Wells?
No, I did not.
Did you kill Beth Wells?
No, I did not.
Did you kill Dennis?
No, I did not.
That's correct.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let's take a short recess and before the cross-examination begins. Now remember, the admonition I've given you before, please don't discuss this case amongst yourselves and express or form any opinion at this time. Anything further, Mr. Wright, you wish me to admonish the jury?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Eustace?
No.
All right. We'll take the regular 15-minute recess, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated, ladies and gentlemen. You waive the call, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, sir.
Right, you wish to cross-examine the witness?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Meese, you answered some questions of Mr. Eustace and spent a great deal of time talking about your relationship with your wife and your early, I guess, this persona that you reinvented yourself when you came to Lexington. I want to talk a little bit more about that. You knew a considerable amount about guns and ammunition, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you talked about guns a lot around people.
Yes, sir.
But that's not all that you talked about around people, is it? In order to try to drive them away from you.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Right. Did you talk a great, and just so I understand, you said that your knowledge of guns and ammunition came from reading military novels, and I think your statement to the jury was that you're not stupid. Is that
correct?
That's correct. Military novels and field manuals and books and magazines.
Guns and Ammo magazine.
And,
magazine.
yes, sir. That's
Now, you
correct.
also talked to people that you worked with and people that you were around about killing people, didn't you?
And people I went to school with in high school.
About killing people.
Yes, sir.
And tell the jury what things that you said to these friends of yours or people that you wanted to keep a distance from you. Tell the jury what things you told them about killing people.
I'm not sure what specifically you're talking about, but you know, I told people I was in the SEALs when I was in high school.
Did you tell them that you
And,
that you loved the Navy SEALs because they got to kill people?
I don't recall saying that specifically, but it's about what I would have said at the time.
What's some other specific
The Navy
things?
SEALs are the most elite of the Special Operations Forces and always have been.
And you have a certain fascination with Navy SEALs
Yes, sir.
and with law enforcement.
Not particularly with law enforcement, but I think that SWAT teams have picked up a lot on military tactics and
And
weapons and tactics involved in that.
what is your fascination based on of SWAT teams and Navy SEALs? Why do you have a fascination with those types of organizations or groups?
I think that's probably a psychological question of I'm not sure qualified to answer, but I'll try. I never got to do any of that, and I never could have been able to do any of that because of my eyesight. I've worn glasses since I was 8 years old, and I would have never been able to qualify for the Navy SEALs or a SWAT team or you know, Army Rangers. I guess I could qualify for Army Rangers, but like special Army Special Forces or Delta Force, I could have never done any of that. And as a kid who got picked on a lot, kind of, you know, the nerdy kid on the edge of the social groups who got picked on a lot, I kind of idolized those people.
And what are some other things that you talked about aside from just the Navy SEALs, but with regard to killing people?
I believe at one point I claimed to have worked for the CIA or for a variety of the intelligence services, and those were all lies and stories that I made up.
So in the statement that you gave on November 15, 2004, when you said that I used to talk wild and crazy stories about the things I did before I came to Lexington. That's true.
I did say wild and crazy stories. I have made up a lot of stories in my life starting about when I was 8,
And you
including the story that I made up that day to you.
You talked to Meg Wellness about killing people.
I talked to Meg Wellness about the stories that I used to say about the Navy SEALs and the CIA and all that craziness.
Let me ask it again. You talked to Meg Wellness about killing people.
I don't remember specifically, but probably.
And you talked to, you knew Terry.
Yes, I knew Terry.
You talked to Terry about just wanting to kill somebody because they made you mad.
I don't believe I ever said that. I think Terry made that up.
When when Terry indicated that you said that to him,
I read that in Discovery.
and so when was that you were alleged to have talked about wanting to kill somebody just because you didn't like them?
Probably in 1993 or late 92.
Around the time that these jokes were going on about killing the Wellens family.
I never was part of any joke about killing the Wellens family.
But you acknowledged to the jury that you talked to a lot of people about killing people and guns and ammo.
I talked about guns and ammo and the Navy SEALs and the CIA and special operations, and that sometimes involves killing people.
All right. So you acknowledged to the jury that you talked about killing people to a lot of your friends and to a lot of other people.
I think you're pulling it out of context, but yes, sir, I did tell a
You
lot of
answer the
people.
questions, okay? Just answer the questions. Did you talk about that to a lot of people?
Yes, I did.
All right. But you deny talking about it to Terry Phelps.
I don't believe that I made the specific comment that you quoted from Terry Phelps, but I talked about the Navy SEALs and the CIA and stuff to Terry.
What else did you talk about to Terry Phelps?
Honestly, 13 or 14 years later, I don't remember.
You don't remember.
But Terry was a real big guy, a carpenter, and I think I probably said a lot of crazy stuff to him.
Now, you talked about your familiarity with guns. You considered yourself to be very knowledgeable of guns, is that correct?
I have a lot of book knowledge of guns.
And you are familiar with the workings of different types of weapons.
Yes, I am.
What is the difference between a 6 Sauer and a Browning high power?
A Browning high power is the standard British 9mm handgun and has been since World War II. Most of the British Commonwealth states, it's their standard handgun. It's a 1935 design by John Browning, the same person who designed the Army Colt 45. A 6 Sauer is a mid-70s adaptation of the John Browning design. It's a double action handgun. It has a no manual safety and a hammer drop decocking lever. It's a little bit more the 6 Sauer is a more high-end gun. It's a little bit more compact. And it's a European manufacturer. It's an Austrian manufacturer instead of a Belgian manufactured weapon.
How does a Norinco relate to a Browning high power?
I don't have a lot of knowledge regarding the specifics of the Norinco except for what I've read in Discovery that you provided.
What is your
Based
knowledge?
on what the information that Warren Mitchell provided, I guess you, and then you provided us. A Norinco is a 1930s design Soviet weapon. It's a single action handgun, single stack magazine. I've never fired one. I don't believe I've even seen one actually, an actual copy of one, not just a picture.
Mr. Eustace asked you about the 6 guns that you had owned. And I think if I kept track, 4 of those were stolen from you.
At different times, yes, sir.
And the only ones that were not stolen was one that you bought for $100 and then resold to a friend of a friend. And
No, sir. I bought a Glock 19 for $250, and I sold it for $350 to a guy that works for the Scott County Department, or worked then for the Scott County Fire Department. The only firearm I ever bought for $100 was that high-power copy, the Argentine high-power copy.
that was stolen from
That was
Mr.
stolen
Beerbauer.
from Mr. Beerbauer, my divorce lawyer.
He was your divorce attorney.
Yes, he was.
And then the Browning high power. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the Browning high power. Who was that given to?
I don't recall his name. He was a black man that I worked with at the rallies on Georgetown Road.
And in the 13 years since this happened, you haven't been able to determine who that was, have you?
I'm sure that I could have determined it back in 1993 when I still had those contacts. Since then, I have forgotten his name. And he supposedly was fronting somebody else. He was acting on behalf of somebody else. So I don't know who else he was acting on behalf of. There was someone beyond him.
Now, in February of 1993, you were asked about this Browning high power that you had.
In March of 1993,
March of 1993.
I was asked about the gun that I had, and I told Roy Wheat that it was a Browning high power.
And you lied to Roy about where you had gotten that gun.
Yes, I did.
And you lied even to Randy about where you had gotten that gun.
Yes, I did.
And why did you lie to Randy about where you had gotten that gun?
It wasn't any of his business.
Why did you lie to Regina about where you had gotten that gun?
I did not lie to Regina about where I got that gun.
Why did you lie to Roy about where you had gotten that gun?
I believed that transaction was borderline, if not illegal, and I believed that Roy worked for the police.
And in fact, didn't they tell you that they were not concerned about an illegal gun transaction or about a convicted felon having a gun? But they were interested in solving a triple homicide.
And I believed that if I told them about it, they would charge both me and that person, and I can't remember his name, whether they were interested in it or not. Just because Mr. Wheat said that doesn't mean he wasn't lying. I believe a state police detective a year later spent 3 weeks every day lying to me, so I'm not sure I would take that face value.
You didn't tell anyone other than Meg where you had gotten that gun, is that correct?
My ex-wife, Regina, my then-wife, Regina, was aware where I got that gun.
Did you tell anyone else where you had gotten that gun?
I don't think it was anyone else's business where I got that gun.
What did you do with that gun?
I gave that to the guy that I worked with at Rowley's. I think he gave me $550 cash for it, which means I would have made about $100 or $150 on the deal.
Did you tell him where you had gotten that gun?
He didn't want to know. He didn't care.
So this Browning high power that for the last now several years, I'll say, has been important in this case. You would agree that it's been important in this case.
It's not the murder weapon, so I'm not sure I would agree that it's important in this case.
Your attorney brought this gun to your attorney's attention, correct?
I brought this gun to Betty Neiman's attention.
So certainly at that time you felt that it was important.
I think Betty felt it was important, yeah.
She didn't know about it until you told her.
No, she knew about it from the interview in 1993, where
I don't know where you purchased the gun.
Right, but she asked that the conversation was based on the interview in 1993 where I told him I had
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
He's talking about conversations between him and his attorney, attorney-client privilege.
He's asked a question. If this gentleman would answer it, he's what? Well, approach the bench, gentlemen. You're the one that's waived attorney-client privilege, Mr. Eustace. You've inquired about all these things about Miss Mimi. He
But-
has a right to explore.
But I never once addressed actual conversations between the two of them.
Oh, yes, you did.
When?
You asked him several times, but you asked him if they had conversations about the plea. You asked him if he was.
Yes, I'm talking about
emotions.
specific
You
words.
asked him about how,
Okay, then
how
I'll-
we came out about how
Okay,
we came
then-
to know about the gun.
Okay,
He said he told Betty Mimi about it.
okay. Then if you're asking what specifically she said, I'll raise the same hearsay objection that you did yesterday, that's hearsay.
Well, I think that objection may be well taken.
He's the defendant. He was present.
So,
No, wait a minute.
but he's saying what Betty said. That's hearsay.
You asked him about what Betty said.
You didn't object. I am.
I have to sustain the objection, Mr. Ryan, as to what was said with Miss Needham.
You have never gone back and discovered who this purported person was that you testified now that you gave this gun to.
No.
Did you agree with Meg's statements yesterday when she said she guessed the police would figure it out? Did you also guess the police would figure that out?
I'm not sure I would agree with that. I think that I told him it was a guy that I worked for at Rowley's and it was a third-party transaction. I'm not sure that the police could have, would have, or I think that if they wanted to, they probably could have.
Now, Meg testified that it was a person that you two went to LCC with.
She was mistaken.
She was wrong about that.
Yeah.
So you disagree with her testimony on that?
I think she was mistaken with regard to that. That may have been her impression, but it wasn't true.
You disagree with her testimony on that?
I think that she was mistaken. That may have been her understanding, but that was not the circumstances.
Did you ever tell her anything about buying a gun for somebody that you went to LCC with?
I don't believe so, but that may have been her impression. I think that was a real rough period of time in her life. And so if she missed some details, I wouldn't be surprised.
Now, you testified earlier that everything in your two confessions were based on discovery.
I'm not sure I said that. Everything in my two statements that I made in 2004 were either based on based on the discovery or the story that I made up around those. I have a lot of experience making up false stories.
You have a lot of experience lying.
Yeah, I've lied a lot in my life. I'm not proud of that fact, but that's the truth.
How many times would you say you've lied to the state police in regard to this investigation?
I have honestly lost count.
You said that after seeing the discovery, you said something in the statement about getting hydroshocks at Walmart.
I believe that was my,
That was your testimony a little earlier.
right, but I'm trying to remember whether it was the November or December statement. You know, in 2004, I made that statement.
There is nothing in discovery about you or anyone else buying hydroshocks at Walmart, is there?
No, I made that up.
So you didn't make that up after seeing discovery.
I made that up on the fly.
So if you said earlier that you made that up based on something you saw in discovery, that would not be correct, would it?
I don't think that I said that I made up the high shocks based on discovery. I made up a lot of things that aren't in discovery, including the pocket doors.
Those aren't anywhere mentioned in discovery.
No, they're not. That was based on my own personal knowledge.
Now, you said earlier that you now agree on the Thursday night of the 25th that Randy left around 11 or 11:30.
That would have to be correct. That's about right.
You told the state police in 1993 that Randy didn't leave until around 1 o'clock.
I believe we all said that in 1993, and
That was not true, was it?
I think we were all wrong. I don't think that was not an intentional lie at the time, but we were incorrect. I believe even Randy said in 1993 that he left around 1 o'clock, but I might be wrong.
When you left to go to Meg's apartment, you and Meg went alone to feed her cats.
And she needed to return some phone calls
Which she had to go to her apartment to do
because she had an answering machine.
at 1 o'clock in the morning.
We kept really strange hours. We were in college.
And, well, when you say we kept really strange hours, Randy had left around 11 to go home and go to bed, correct?
He hadn't gone home to go to bed. He'd gone home because he was working on his master's thesis.
He had gone home.
Well, that might be wrong. He had a thesis. It was either his master's thesis or his PhD. And he had to go, and he kept really strange hours. He was working on something with Linux or something or other, and he had to check it, like in the middle of the night, at the mainframe UK. And he could do that from his home computer. He had left. I'm not sure if he went home or where he went. But he had to go because he had to work on his thesis.
Your wife went to bed,
Yes, she did.
and you and Meg went to her apartment so she could check messages, return calls, and feed her cats.
Yes.
And she made a long distance phone call that ended at 2:18 Eastern time, correct?
I believe that's correct. There's a phone record of that.
10 minutes later, you paid for gas at a BP station, or she paid for gas, you were present.
Yes.
And after that, tell the jury, I know at some point you went and got coffee at Denny's. And
Probably Denny's or Perkins. Right after we got gas, we went and got coffee, and then we went to my house, or my apartment.
And did what?
We were studying English literature 262. We had an exam the following week.
When the following week?
Tuesday the following week, I believe.
So on Thursday night at 3 in the morning, you were studying for a literature exam for the following Tuesday.
I've been a night person my whole life, Mr. Wright. Yes, we were studying.
I think, in fact, during your statement, during your confession, you made the comment that some of us see well at night despite the glasses.
Yes, sir. I see Will at night despite the losses. I drove a cab for 2 years in Lexington night shift.
Went to school during the day.
Yes, sir.
At that time, you were working part-time during the day.
I was working full-time, and I was working as a second shift. Well, the equivalent of second shift. I was a closing manager at a fast food restaurant, and that means that I would, on my days off, I would sleep during the day, and I would go to work about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I would get off about 12:30 or 1, and then I'd be up a couple hours after that. I'd go to bed usually around 4 o'clock, between 4 and 6 o'clock in the morning.
You didn't work on that Wednesday, the 24th, did you?
I'm not sure if I did or not. I probably worked Wednesday the 24th.
After you got off work, so then you went down to Columbia.
Yeah.
And that was for what purpose?
Meg wanted us to meet her parents.
So you agree that on that 24th, you made your first trip to Columbia to the Wellness house.
Yes.
And your testimony earlier was that you saw and observed pocket doors on that first trip.
On that first trip, as well as the subsequent trips after killed.
And so you were in the upstairs part of the home on that first trip.
On the first trip, I was, I think Regina and I both got a tour of the house. And I think it was Randy, but I'm not sure. It might have been Meg. We didn't go into Dennis's bedroom, and we didn't go into Joe and Beth's room, but like just showing us where how the house was laid out. It was kind of a, this is where I live. Let me show you the house.
And you noticed that those, I think you described those pocket doors as being a unique architectural design.
That was my impression, yes, sir. I think that at the time Gina did a lot of drafting and house design, and she probably would have picked up on it and noticed it and brought it to my attention. I had certainly never seen anything like it before.
I'm kind of going through somewhat the order that Mr. Eustace went through, so I want to talk to you a little about the letter you sent to Meg in 1998.
Okay.
Now, you indicated in your testimony that you did say that you felt your life had been ruined, or the problems in your life had been caused by Meg.
I probably said something to that effect
In the letter.
in the letter.
And that you're being interviewed by the state police was caused by Meg.
Absolutely.
So the tone of that letter was that you were upset with Meg.
I'm not sure that's correct. I'm not sure I was upset with Meg. I was asking Meg for help.
Okay, you told her that all the problems in your life were caused by her. What you just said.
Yeah, something to that effect.
And you told her that the state police questioning you and bothering you was caused by her.
Yes.
But you weren't upset with her.
I wasn't upset individually with her. I was asking for her help in starting long business.
The tone of the letter was that you were upset with her because of the problems that you were encountering in your life being caused by her.
If that was the tone of my letter, it certainly wasn't intentional, but it could have been.
And you were blaming her for all the problems in your life, and at the same time asking her for money.
Yeah, I was asking her for help starting my business.
And it's your testimony that if you blamed her for all of your problems, you felt like that would make her want to invest in your business?
I don't think it was probably the right thing to do, but I think that, and obviously it wasn't effective, but I think that it was kind of a guilt trip. You've caused me trouble in my life. Can you help me out and help me get my life jump-started, for want of a better word?
Now, Meg had caused you problems. Don't you just testify?
No, I think that you're putting words in my mouth. I think the state police had caused me problems, and the state police had caused me problems because I knew Meg.
Yeah, I thought
So
you just said that
I think that
was that you.
Objection argumentative at that point.
Finish the question, Mr. Richard, all right?
Mr. B, I thought you just testified that the tone of the letter was, Meg, you've caused me all my problems in my life.
if that's what I said, I apologize. I think the tone of the letter might have been that my problems were caused because I knew Meg. And in a way, it was kind of a guilt trip. But I don't think Meg intentionally caused all my problems.
Okay, so you didn't, when Mr. Eustace was asking you questions earlier, you didn't say that the problems in your life were caused by Meg, and that was in this letter?
I might have said that, and that boils it down to a whole lot simpler and less complicated reading than what you're putting into it now. Yeah, I think that the problems in my life were caused by the state police because I knew Meg, and I was trying to guilt trip her into helping me start a business.
And that was in 1998.
That was, I'm thinking it was in late 97 or 98. I'm not real sure exactly, but I would guess it's 98.
Now, what problems were you having in your life that were caused by Meg in 1998?
Like I said, it was a guilt trip thing. It wasn't necessarily true. I was trying to get her to help me start my own business. And, in a little bit of guilt in her direction to try to help motivate her to do that. And I'm not saying that was the right thing to do because in retrospect it certainly wasn't. But, I said it.
But what problems were you having in your life at that time that were caused by Meg or the state police?
I'm not aware of any at that time that I was having. I was working full-time driving a cab, and I was trying to start a lawn business. At that time, I might have even been working for Guaranteed Pest Control at the same time. So I was working for Guaranteed Pest Control during the day, working for the cab company at night, in between doing lawn work.
Do you feel now that your problems were caused by Meg?
I wouldn't blame Meg for my problems right now.
So if in that letter you said you had problems at that time, that was not true. And if you said that they were caused by Meg, that was not true either.
I was having trouble getting my business started. I was having trouble making ends meet. I worked a lot of hours.
So you were having problems.
I think I was having the same problems every working person in America has.
And you sent a letter to, how long had it been since you had spoken to Meg when you sent that letter to her in 98?
Whenever she got married, maybe shortly after she got married. The last time I talked to Meg before I sent her that letter was probably when she moved to Michigan, and I'm not sure if that was before or after she got married to Randy.
When did she get married?
I'm not sure. I know it's in discovery, but it's not something I pay particular attention to. I think Meg said something about it in her testimony. She said something about being married since 1995.
So you hadn't spoken to her in 3 years?
That would be right. When they moved to Michigan, I called her and asked her who she was going to rent the house to Orchard Avenue. The house she was living in on Orchard Avenue that her grandmother owned. She was paying something just ridiculous small amount for rent that the previous tenants had been paying, like $235 or $300 a month. And I called her when I found out she was moving to Michigan and asked who she was going to rent the house out to, because my impression was that Mary was going to keep it at that really outrageously low, and I was interested in renting the house. And she told me that she was going to rent it out to two friends of hers who had two kids, or to friends of hers who had two children. And that was the last time I talked to her before 1998.
And out of the blue, you chose to send her a letter asking for money because of the problems she had caused you.
She was the only person of means that I knew who could have hypothetically invested something like $10,000 or $20,000 into a startup lawn care business.
You also sent a letter to Mary.
I sent a letter. There were two independent letters. The letter that I sent to Meg went through Mary.
And the second one you sent addressed to Mary.
There was a letter sent to Mary.
And you sent a letter to her also wanting money.
Actually, I asked her if she would be willing to have lunch with me to discuss a business proposal, because again, she and Meg were the only people I knew who had, for want of a better word, investment capital.
You were looking for money.
Yes, to start a lawn business.
And you wanted, how long had it been since you had spoken to Mary?
A long time.
And at the same time, then, out of the blue, you sent a letter to her wanting to meet for lunch
To discuss
and her to give you a large sum of money.
to invest in a business as a business proposal. I was aware that Ms. has a lot of I don't know if she still does now, but at that time had a lot of investments in real estate, and it was my impression that maybe she had done some venture capital. I'm not aware.
Did you get a response to either of those letters?
I got a response from Meg. I did not get a response from Randy.
That's the letter that Justin found about a few days ago.
I believe so.
So you don't disagree that he saw a letter you wrote to Meg?
I don't know if he saw a letter I wrote to Meg. I know that he mischaracterizes it. It's not correct what he seems to want to say about that.
You ever been convicted of a felon?
Yes, sir.
You said that Protective Services talked to you briefly also in around October of 2002.
They talked to me briefly in 2001 when Regina was not giving Victoria, my youngest daughter, her medicine.
What did you tell them to leave?
Actually, my roommate, girl named Jennifer, had some issues, and she freaked out and she told them to leave.
You were there also.
I was there also. I was living in her house on Hot Springs Court at the time.
Let me see counsel, please. I'm going to believe I'm under a duty to admonish the jury. Under A or B.
I don't know if it's necessary now or in final instructions.
No, it has to be done now if I'm going to do it. If you don't want it, I will not do it.
Oh, I don't need it.
The step we draw your attention to.
No. No.
You don't want it?
No.
So this is an admonishment that they would consider this only as it affects his credibility,
Yeah.
not as substantive evidence.
No
You do
problem.
not want that admonishment.
Okay.
Very well. I'm sorry for the interruption, Mr. Wright. You may continue.
Yes, sir. Mr. Eustace talked to you about your conversations with Catherine Felice.
Yes, sir.
You talked at length with Catherine Felice about killing people, didn't you?
Yeah.
You
She was
talked
very interested in it.
at length with Catherine Felice about setting up alibis.
She asked about it. I came up with some craziness off the top of my head, yeah.
You told her how to set up an alibi to kill somebody, didn't you?
Yeah, I said something to that effect.
You told her what to do with the physical evidence after you killed somebody, didn't you?
Yeah, I think I said something about putting it in a trash bag. And that was something I had read in some crime novel, like a James Patterson novel or that type of genre.
You told her about washing your hands after you killed someone.
Yeah.
You told her when she asked you if you had seen dead bodies, your response was, "Are you talking about the Wellens family?"
She'd been talking about the Wellens family right before that. So when she asked the question,
That's who you said.
I said,
Wellens
what, the
family.
Wellens family? And she said, whoever.
And what was your response then?
And I lied to her and said, yeah, I've seen dead bodies.
You told her, "Yeah, I've seen dead bodies."
The only dead body I've ever seen was my grandmother when she passed away when I was 12.
In fact, you told her what the looks were on those dead bodies' faces, didn't you?
I said shock. which I think I also got out of a book somewhere.
All this is out of a book somewhere.
It's all made up stories.
All made up story out of a book somewhere. It's all a game, isn't it, to you?
No, sir, I think that's probably an understatement.
Your reasons for talking about these things to Catherine Police is because you suspected she was an undercover officer?
You know,
Yes or no?
I'm not sure I suspected she was an undercover officer. I thought she was.
Please answer the question, Mr. Mace.
Yes, I thought she was an undercover officer, and I thought she was crazy because she kept talking about wanting to get rid of her abusive husband.
In fact, the first morning that you met with her, you dry fired a 9mm to her face, didn't you?
I don't believe I dry fired that city at her. I'm not. I've never been have a dry firing guns. It's bad for the firing pin, and it's bad for the weapon. I don't believe that occurred.
So you disagree with her testimony about that happening?
I disagree with her testimony. I may have shown her that weapon. I may have shown her that gun that morning, but I don't think I dry fired at her.
You talked at length about shooting people, killing people, setting up alibis, didn't you?
That was what she wanted to talk about, so that's what we talked about. She was cute and blonde and flirtatious and...
And in fact, right before you went to the Lexington police, earlier that evening, before you went to Jacobson Park, you had spoken with Meg, hadn't you?
I'm not sure if it was the same day or not that I spoke with Meg. I spoke with Meg sometime during that period of time, and I got more and more uneasy about who I now know to be Catherine Felice. And the more uneasy I got, the more I felt I needed to go to the Lexington Police Department.
You talked about your concerns with Meg, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And you talked about the fact that this lady was wanting you to kill somebody, and you talked about the fact that you didn't know if she was truthful with you or not.
Yes.
And you talked about the fact that you were going to test her to see if she was an officer or not, didn't you?
I might have said something to that effect, yeah.
And you talked with Meg about making passes at Catherine Felice and wanting to go to Jacobson Park and set up an encounter with her, didn't you?
I'm not sure that I talked specifically to Meg about Jacobson Park and setting up an encounter, but I certainly talked to Meg about making passes at her.
To see what her reaction would be.
Yes, that too.
And so that was a discussion that you had with Meg.
Probably in the presence of Randy and my ex-wife.
Because there's somebody offering you money to kill somebody. And you wanted to know if she was an officer.
No, I don't believe Katie Felice ever offered me money to kill somebody. Katie Felice kept talking about how to kill her so-called abusive husband. But I don't think she ever offered me money to kill anybody. And I didn't talk to Meg about that. I talked to Meg about this woman who I thought was either unbalanced or a state police detective, probably playing spades at Tally Ho, which is a campus restaurant. And every Thursday night, the group of people attached with the phone bulletin boards called phoners would get together and play spades at Tally Ho. And I had conversations when I would run into Meg there, because I knew Meg still had concerns with the state police. But I don't think Katie Felice ever offered me money to kill anybody.
You talked with Meg about the fact that Shauna Norman, as you knew her, was talking to you about how to kill her abusive husband.
Yeah, I talked to Meg about that.
And part of this conversation was, how can I figure out if she is an officer or if she's really wanting somebody killed? Part of the conversation with you and Meg, correct?
I'm not sure that was part of the conversation. I think part of the conversation was I thought she was either a cop or she was crazy. And that if it went much farther, I would have to go to the Lexington Police Department and turn this woman in because it was getting out of hand.
and you decided to make some passes at her, make some advances.
I had already been flirtatious with her, and she'd already been flirtatious with me, and I'd already made some passes at her by the time those conversations ever happened.
We just talked about that in this conversation, you decided to make some passes at her to see if she was an officer or if she was for real talking to you about killing somebody.
Yeah.
And that's when you paged her and asked her to meet you at Jacobson Park.
I'm not sure that that's the exact sequence of events.
When you paged her and she called you back, how did you answer the phone? What did you say?
Said God speaking.
You said God speaking.
And that's what I read in Discovery, and that would not have been uncommon for me to answer the phone like that.
You're bringing yourself as God.
Yeah, it wasn't correct, and
Obviously.
it's blasphemy. But
if-
at the same time, I also answered the phone at the time as Insanity Incorporated too. So
If you would, Mr. Meese. After that, you asked her to meet you at Jacobson Park.
yeah, I did.
And your primary intention for wanting to meet her at Jacobson Park was to make an advance or make a pass at her. A more aggressive one
I made more aggressive passes
at Jacobson
at
Park.
her at Jacobson Park.
And this was done sort of out in the middle of, out in the open area where people play soccer at Jacobson Park, wasn't it?
It's off in the corner in the back, actually, the park. There's farmland on one side, and I'm not sure if it was on a soccer field or not, but it was an open field, and there was no one around.
And she turned away your aggressive advances, didn't she?
Yes, she did. She said no when I stopped.
And after that's when you immediately went into the Lexington police.
Well, she had said some stuff during the Jacobson Park incident that really made me uncomfortable, and I thought that at that point I was getting in over my head and I needed to get out because
You thought she might be an undercover officer.
she was either an undercover officer or she was crazy. Either way, I didn't want anything to do with it.
So if she had just been talking about killing an abusive husband, and you hadn't have thought she was crazy, but you thought she was sane, and you hadn't have thought she was an officer, you wouldn't have gone to the police.
No, I think that if had she, the way that the conversations about this abusive husband went, and the deeper she tried to drag me into this conspiracy, this talking about killing her abusive husband, the more and more uncomfortable I got with it, and I think that that I at some point was going to go to the Lexington Police Department because I didn't want anything to do with that.
At some point you were going to, but it happened to be after she turned away your advances.
Yeah. But she turned away my advances the day that I took her to the gun range in Paris that she testified to.
Let's talk about that a little bit. At the gun range in Paris, you demonstrated your knowledge of weapons and your ability to shoot a weapon, correct?
Yes, I did some shooting.
And you agree with her description of your shooting technique.
On that day, yes.
Self-taught. It wasn't
Self-taught.
professionally taught, but it was a self-taught technique that you had utilized a lot.
No, I hadn't utilized a lot. I utilized it some, but obviously it wasn't professionally taught.
It wasn't a perfect shot, was it?
And it wasn't good shooting. I mean, she said it herself, it wasn't good shooting.
And you would agree with her description of your shooting pattern that it was a loose upper body spray on those silhouette targets that you shot at.
Yeah, it was, yeah, I would agree with
A
that.
number of shots to the head.
There were no
And a
shots.
number of shots
There were
to
no
the,
shots to the head, Mr. Wright.
and there was a number of shots to the upper body.
There were a number of shots to the upper body.
But you talked to her about headshots being important in making a kill, didn't you?
Yeah, that's, I got that out of some, I either saw it on a Discovery Channel special on the Navy SEALs, I'm not sure the word obsessed is right, but I certainly have an affinity for them, that the standard room clearing technique for Delta Force and the SEALs and that type of elite group was 2 shots to the chest and 1 to the head. And I think I specifically told her that.
I think the question was, you had a loose upper body
Yes,
pattern,
I did.
and you talked to her a great deal about headshots.
And I did talk to her about headshots.
You also talked to her about the smell of cordite and fresh blood.
Yes.
You talked to her about how 124 grain hollow points was the best for killing people.
I'm not sure I ever used the term best for killing people. At the time, I was shooting Starfire, which is a brand and type of hollow point. It's
Those are
124 grain. That's an excellent self-defense round.
So you think the start fire would be better for killing people than the hollow points?
A starfire is a type of hollow point, sir.
Than the federal 124 grains, I should say. You think the star fires would be better for killing somebody?
I think they're a better defensive ammunition. I think they'd be better for stopping power.
Shot placement's everything.
I believe I said that to him.
You agree with that?
Yes, sir.
You talked to her about how USA brand or the lead core bullets are better for targets
Yes, sir.
and the hollow points are better for killing people.
The hollow points are a better defensive round. Yes, sir.
You said that your confession came from discovery. Your timeline came from discovery.
Discovering things that I made up to make it a good story.
Your testimony earlier was that your timeline came from discovery.
Okay.
And in fact, you knew that it took about a couple of hours to drive from Lexington to Columbia, didn't you?
When Randy drove it Wednesday night, it took about an hour and a half.
Now, you said earlier, and this is something that I got a little confused on. You may have gotten confused
Okay.
yourself, I'm not sure. But you said that you made that story up before you knew about the weather problem. That's not true, is it?
I'm not sure if it's before I knew about the weather problem. I made that story up without factoring in the weather, for want of a better word.
In fact, the weatherman was retained by Miss Nemi.
Miss Nemi never shared that with me.
May we approach, please?
Do what?
Approach.
Yes, you may.
He was hired by Guthrie, not Nene. She has requested funding to retain.
He was called to testify, so I can only assume that request was approved.
No.
That's
When?
what the letter says. I'm just going on.
Who was called to testify?
Trapasso,
When?
yesterday.
That was not by Nene. I got him on my own after. It was Guthrie.
I believe Mr. Guthrie is the one who filed a copy in discovery.
Miss Nene provided me with a copy.
Well, she may have, but I thought Mr. Guthrie did that.
Guthrie's the one that hired him. She did not hire him. I hired him for this trial after I got a copy of a letter
I
from
can't remember.
her to Guthrie.
Yeah, you hired him for this trial.
Right.
But she had requested funding for him.
I don't know. She said, I'm gonna. Doesn't say
She said
she did.
I have requested funding to retain Trapasso. That was October 25th or 4th.
But I don't know if she got funding or not. Because I
Well,
don't think
we'll
she
let-
did because
Gentlemen, just a moment. We'll
Okay.
let the jury go out and we'll look at the court file just a minute. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have to take up the matter here. And you'll have to go outside for just a few moments. Please remember the admonition I've given you. And just stay in the jury room, please. When the jury is outside of the courtroom, we have all the record up here. Gentlemen, you're welcome to come up here and go through this. I cannot remember.
that's the first time I've ever seen that letter.
Judge, my only point in asking the question was to demonstrate that Miss Nemi had knowledge of this weather well in advance of his confession.
Well,
And I have a basis, in fact, for asking that question.
but he's misstating his testimony to start with. He said, he didn't say he never knew about the weather. He said he didn't take it into account.
I wrote down, he may have, but I wrote down that he made the story to fit discovery, and it was before he knew about the weather problem.
I don't think he said that. Anyway, he knew about the weather problem because he was stuck in it.
No, that's not what we're discussing. As a gentleman, I believe we're discussing who, if anyone filed in discovery, a reciprocal discovery, a report from the gentleman from Western who testified
Right.
here. I do not recall. Here's this record. We'll have to go through it.
I'm sorry,
Is it in the record?
I don't know.
I don't think I was provided the report through a supplemental discovery pleading. I was just simply sent a letter by Ms. Nemi along with a copy of the report as supplemental discovery. I was never aware that she filed it in the court record, though she may have, I don't know.
I have seen a copy of it. I don't know who sent me a copy of it, but I have seen a copy of it. Can't tell you any more than that. It seems to me like I refused to sign an order, but I do not remember. I've signed so many, gentlemen.
I contacted Trapasso based on a copy of a letter from Guthrie to Betty Nemi saying, I am enclosing a copy of Trapasso's report to you. That's how I got linked up with Trapasso. No, I wouldn't. No, she would. I wouldn't. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. He's not represented, remember they was banging heads. I don't know what she.
Well, Mr. Wright, you may ask the question of the witness if he's aware of the report,
Okay, that's fair.
regardless of who did it.
Yes.
That's fair.
That's the way to do that. I believe I've heard what his answer is, so we'll proceed with that. And put the file back over that, please. I just know I saw it at some point in time. And I cannot be more specific than that, gentleman, or so. If there was a motion filed, if it was under seal.
Yeah.
It would still be under seal.
And it might be in the wellness case as opposed to this one. The already applicant or whatever.
Could be. I do not know. Sorry for the question. All right, I'm gonna bring the jury back in then, gentlemen. If you would, please. Rephrase your question, Mr. Wright, if you can, please. Please be seated, ladies and gentlemen. The record shows all 12 jurors are back in the jury box. You may continue now, Mr. Wright.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Mr. Meason, when did you learn of a report that there was a weather problem, as you described it earlier?
I knew there was a weather problem because in '93 we had all the problems in Lexington with the weather. I was not aware of the report, and I actually haven't seen the report that you're talking about even today. I was here for Mr. Trapasso's. I'm sorry if I mispronounced his name. I was here for his testimony. I never saw his report even before this trial. And Betty Nemi certainly didn't share that with me.
Now, you also testified that your confession that you made, that you crafted the timeline to fit the discovery.
Yes, sir.
So you agree then that according to all the discovery, the murders happened around 4 a.m.
No, sir. The only way that murders happen and they fit me is if they happen around 4 or 4:30 in the morning. I think the discovery...
I didn't hear you there.
No, sir, I do not agree that the discovery says that the murders happened at 4 o'clock in the morning. The physical evidence at the time of the crime and the discovery says that the murders happened between 10:30 and midnight Central Time, according to the coroner's report. The only way that this would fit me in the story that I had to make up to make you happy would be as if I fit the murders at 4 to 4:30 in the morning, and that they couldn't have happened any time before 4 because I was in Lexington until at least 2:30.
Only according to the gas receipt that you were there at 2:30 and the 4 people's statements that you all were playing cards, correct?
That's what we did, sir. The only time that I had that I didn't have an alibi for was between 2:30 based on that gas receipt because we didn't get a receipt for coffee. And between that and 6:30 and 7 o'clock in the morning when Meg went back to Randy's house.
In fact, that gas receipt and the phone calls that Meg made only provide an alibi for Meg. Isn't that correct?
And I was with Meg that entire time, and I believe that Meg has consistently told the truth at the risk of her own life regarding that, except for the time that she lied to you in the Casey County Jail in December.
So you're in Meg's alibi between the time Randy left and Regina went to bed at 11, 11:30. The only alibi you have for being in Lexington until the next morning when Regina saw you coming back in is Meg.
No, because Regina saw us coming back in after we got coffee at 3 or 3:30 in the morning, and we came in together. And then I woke Regina up probably when I went to bed that morning at 6:30 or 7, which is where she's getting that timeline from.
So you didn't you're not telling this jury that you made the timeline to fit all the discovery, just that you made the timeline to fit the gaps in your alibi.
I made the timeline up to fit based on discovery, and in fact, it was going to take about 2 hours to get to Columbia. And then I had an alibi until 2:30. And 2:30 plus an hour and a half or 2 hours to get to Columbia makes it 4:30 in the morning.
Your alibi until 2:30 is Meg.
And my alibi until 2:30 was Meg.
And you agree that from 2:30 until dawn, you don't have an alibi, do you?
Certainly I did. Meg was with me at my apartment.
Meg is your alibi. Other than Meg, you don't have an alibi, do you?
Other than Meg, who was risking her life to tell the truth to this jury, I don't have an alibi.
Now, you said that you only made this confession to get a plea deal.
I only made this confession to get him in trial. I made this confession to get new lawyers and to get a change of venue and a continuance because I didn't think that I could get a fair trial with Betty Mimi as my attorney.
You wanted new attorneys and a new place to try your case.
Yes.
And you felt like you could beat it.
I felt like, and I still feel like, and I know that I am not guilty, I am innocent of these charges, and I felt that an attorney who would make a defense could prove that.
Are you good and experienced at lying? Yes or no?
I'm not very good at it, but I'm experienced at it. I think that everybody understands that I'm not a good liar. I think that we've had a lot of testimony in this trial to that effect.
You recall being placed under oath by Judge Weddle,
Yes, sir, I do.
and under oath you acknowledged that you were guilty of these crimes.
I said what I had to say in order to accomplish what I needed to accomplish to get a fair trial. And I believe that I lied under oath, Mr. Wright, in that you were fully aware that during that proceeding, I lied under oath in that guilty plea. And you didn't say anything at all about
That
it.
I was fully aware that you
You were
lied.
fully aware that there was a deal in place above and beyond what was on that piece of paper so that I could see my children.
Isn't it true, Mr. Meese, that the only thing to do with your children was that I wasn't going to interfere with you having visitation through your divorce attorney?
I believe, Mr. Wright, that my attorney went to you and you got a fax from my ex-wife's attorney saying that in fact, that visit would occur as long as I pled guilty to a life sentence or greater, if I recall. But I'm not sure of the exact phrase, but I do know that there was a fax that was shown to me by my attorney as part of those plea negotiations for me to get to see my kids. And that fax was topped with David Kaplan, who's my ex-wife's attorney. And I don't know for a fact he sent that, but I think his secretary signed off on it. That said that there was an agreement in place that if I made a plea deal, I would get a visit with my children to explain it to them. And that you were aware of that because that fax came to your office, and you were certainly aware of it on the 15th of December.
That's your testimony.
That I'm sorry, did Mr. Kaplan not send that fax to your office, and did you not provide that to Melissa Bliss?
The only agreement was that you would offer a truthful statement and agree to cooperate against Meg Wellness. Isn't that correct?
And I lied to you, didn't I? I didn't keep that agreement, did I, Mr.
Please
Wright?
answer the question, Mr.
That was not the only agreement. There was an agreement that that was not the only agreement. There was an agreement that I would get to see my kids.
And you were to give a truthful statement regarding your involvement in the Wellness murders, weren't you?
That was part of the agreement, and I did not.
Part of the agreement was that you were to give a truthful statement regarding your involvement in the Wellness murders.
That was part of, I was to give a truthful statement, and I did not, and I was to cooperate and testify, and I
And
did
your
not.
offer in that case was made well before you making any statements about your involvement in this case, wasn't it?
I'm not sure that's true. We came over from the jail then at 12:30 in the afternoon on Monday the 15th of November. And Melissa Blue and I talked and discussed this for about 3.5 hours, where she tried to sell me this deal. And part of that sale was the fact that I would get a visit with my children, and that if I did not cooperate and testify, that I would proceed to a trial by jury. And that deal was probably signed very shortly before that statement was made.
A month before the statement was made on December 15th, 2004, correct?
And a month before it was the statement in December. That's correct.
So, just so the jury's clear, why did you give a confession to killing the Wellness family?
So that I could get a fair trial.
And you told some things in that confession that were not included in discovery, didn't you?
I'm sure there were some things that I made up as I went along.
You described in the confession that you gave, you described Dennis Wellness as collateral damage, didn't you?
I think Regina had made some comment in discovery about that, and I picked up on it.
Question for you, Mr. Meese, was
Yes, I did
in your
describe.
confession, you
Yes,
described Dennis Wellness as collateral damage.
Yes, and I believe I picked that up somewhere in discovery.
You explained in your confession exactly what you did with the clothes that you wore when you went down there and killed the Wellnesses, didn't you?
Which is exactly what I had read in the police report that Katie Police had made up.
Which was also the same thing that your wife had said.
She might have said something to that effect, and she was my ex-wife at the time.
And certainly when she said that, she hadn't known about anything to do with Catherine Police, did she?
I think I pretty much got my wife up to date with Catherine Police. Catherine Police talked to my ex-wife a whole bunch at the same time she was talking to me. And, you know, my ex-wife heard a lot of crazy stuff out of my mouth, and she probably heard that more than once.
You said during your confession that you started to cut the box open with a hacksaw blade, didn't you?
I believe I said that.
There is no mention anywhere in discovery about there being anything on that safe indicative of being cut open with a hacksaw blade, is there?
I don't believe there is, but I do know that probably in 96 or 97, when I worked for Louisville Lexington Exterminating, we lost the keys to that box, which is where I came up with the rest of that statement about Brock the Lock Doc, because we lost the keys to that box, and I took that, what happened when we lost the keys to that box, and I fit it into that story. Because I started to open that box when we had pictures locked into it with a hacksaw, and my ex-wife talked me out of cutting it open. And then I later went to Grot the Lock Doc, because I figured I was going to have to have them open it. And Grot the Lock Doc, who's a locksmith in Lexington, provided me a key for it. And I just took that incident out of context and put it into that statement, because I thought it made the statement sound better.
You told Dale that there were 16 shots fired in the house, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, that's how many shots you believed were fired in the house. Isn't that correct?
I based the number 16 on the fact that Benji had asked me within a week and a half before Dell and Roy and whoever else was at Roy, the 16th of March, talked to me. Benji and Randy had gone around, and Benji specifically had asked me about what kind of guns, 9mm handguns, would hold 15 shots. And 15 plus 1 is 16, and that's where I got the 16 number, and that's what I thought it was until I saw Discovery.
That's not what you told the officers March 16th of 1993. Is
I said that there were 16 shots fired, and I believe they asked where I heard that information, and I refused to give that to them because I was pretty confident that Benji had nothing to do with these murders. He was out of town that night, and I wasn't going to stick the case with the Kentucky State Police on me.
You weren't going to what?
I wasn't going to stick the Kentucky State Police on him. I was not going to send the Kentucky State Police to him. I knew that they had already interviewed him, and if they hadn't, they would later interview him. But Benji was out of town that night, so I know that when Benji was asking about these 15-shot 9mm, it was some academic exercise for him, and that he had only the best of intentions. I knew that Benji was not involved in these murders.
You knew that he wasn't involved.
I knew he wasn't involved because he was out of town in an academic meeting, and when he and I and Randy had talked about it at length.
In fact, after they questioned you about the 16 shots that you said were fired in the house, you said, well, actually, I heard there were more than 10. You backed off from the 16, didn't you?
Yeah, the newspaper said more than 10.
You said that you had heard there were more than 10.
Yes.
Speaking of the newspaper, you've made numerous calls to the newspaper, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
And to the Lexington television stations.
Yes, I have.
And
Can I object as to relevance to that?
It's not been asked and answered, Mr. Knight.
Well, any continuation on that?
Sir?
Well, I'll wait for the next question and object.
something to do.
Okay.
In your confession, you explained why you originally thought 16 shots, and you explained how there were actually 17, didn't you?
I made that up to fit the discovery.
In fact, you said you knew you had fired one magazine through, which was 13, and then you knew that after you ordered Dennis Wellness to the ground, to the floor of his bedroom, that you shot him 3 more times, and you thought that that meant 16. That's what you said, didn't it?
I said it, but I made it up.
And then you recall that you had actually taken one off the top of the second clip, put it in the chamber, then inserted another 13 rounds, which gave you 14 in the gun, plus 3 off the second magazine would make 17.
I didn't recall it. I may have said it, but I didn't recall it. I made it up. I made it up so it would fit 17. Because clearly 16 was the wrong number.
You could have said that you had a 15-round clip, one in the chamber, one off the next, but you explained that specifically, that there were 13 and then 3 off the second magazine.
A Browning high power.
Go ahead.
There has been testimony from the state police that they're not sure the standard magazine capacity of Browning high power. Browning high power has the standard magazine is a 13-round magazine. So if you start with the fact that I had a Browning high power, which was not the murder weapon, in order to get from 13 to 17, you have to figure out how to make that happen, and I did.
You also talked about, when asked from then Sergeant Dennis Bedingfield if anybody was saying anything when you killed him, you gave him an answer to that, didn't you?
If he asked it, I answered it.
You told him, in fact, that Dennis was screaming.
If he asked it, I don't specifically recall that, but I will take the word for it.
And you demonstrated to him how Dennis was holding his arms up, didn't you?
And I based that on the coroner's report that he had shots in his arms.
The coroner's report.
Yes, sir. that I'd gotten on the 3rd of October from Miss Nemi. She provided the coroner's report, and it showed that he had wounds to his hand. I based it on his finger, actually, because there was something either in the coroner's report or in the discovery that his finger had been shot. And so I moved his hands farther up. I'm sorry, I come off the mic. I moved his hands farther up on his head than where they actually apparently were. But clearly I lied to you, Mr. Wright, and you knew it when I did it. And Mr. Wheat knew it when I lied to you. And, you know, I made up a lot of stuff.
The Browning high power that you talked about, you bought it solely to resell it to a person at work.
Yes.
But you don't know who his name is.
I don't recall his
You
name.
don't know where he is now.
No, sir.
And after the 8th, then 3 days later, you went back and bought 1,000 rounds of USA brand ammunition.
No, sir. I did not.
All right. Tell us how many rounds of ammunition you bought.
I bought between Meg and I, we bought 9 boxes, not 20 boxes. You have received a discovery that says we bought 9 boxes, and I told Roy on the 16th of November that I had bought a total of 11 boxes, because I bought 2 boxes the night that I bought the gun, and I bought 9 boxes later on. And when people, Mr. who worked for Sports Unlimited for 6 months, remembers me buying some 1,000 rounds of ammunition, I have never in my life bought 1,000 rounds of ammunition at one time.
You disagree with his testimony.
I absolutely disagree. And the physical evidence in this case that Roy went back and looked and found in this case, after I told him I bought ammunition at Sports Unlimited, says that I bought 9 boxes, which is exactly what, between Meg and I, we bought 9 boxes. I don't recall if I bought 4 and she bought 5, but between the two of us, we bought 4 and 5.
And after you bought this gun, when did you resell it to your friend?
We took it out on a Saturday shooting, and I think you've recreated that on the calendar. In the following week, I think the following Friday, Thursday or Friday, I resold it. I sold it to him. I'm not sure reselling it's the right term, but I sold it to him.
You bought it, then sold it,
I bought it and then sold it.
according to you.
I'm the only one who knows what I did to it.
I agree with that. After you bought this gun to sell, you bought 9 boxes of ammunition and some silhouette targets to go out and familiarize yourself with that gun, correct?
Part of what I was going to be able to do was go out and shoot the gun first, and I like to target shoot, and so I went out target shooting
With those silhouette targets,
with those silhouette targets.
silhouettes of human beings.
They're standard police silhouette targets, and I went to, as a matter of fact, I think I even told Roy about it back in '93, but I went to a gun store called the Gun Site in Lexington. It's the corner of Nicholasville and Tiverton Road, looking for targets, and they didn't have any of the standard bullseye type targets, and they didn't have any silhouette targets. And he suggested that I call Galls, because that's where he got his silhouette targets from, and I did, and that's why I bought the targets from Galls. And I believe even that I told Roy, and if I told him then it was true, that I sold some of those targets to the guy that owns the gun site, the gun store there at the corner of Tiverton and Nicholasville Road in Lexington, because he was willing to buy them at my cost from me, and I clearly didn't need 100 or however many came in a box.
You also bought a thumb loader to assist you in loading the magazines.
Yeah, my ex-wife and Meg both had a real hard time with the real stiff magazine springs, and so I bought a thumb loader to make it easier for them.
And you took all that to the target range on the 13th.
That sounds about right, yes. I think the 13th was the day we went down there.
Less than 2 weeks before the murders.
Yes.
And when Roy Wheat and now Major Sapp and now Major Hancock were interviewing you March 16th, you didn't want to tell them an identity of somebody they could go talk to about where that gun was that you were target practicing with less than 2 weeks before the murder, correct?
Yes, sir. And at the time, I believe I told them I was concerned about for my safety and the safety of my wife and children if I did that. And
Yeah.
therefore, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You also said in your statement, in your confession, honestly, I was just shocked he was still sitting up.
I lied.
You have no problem lying, do you?
At this point in my life, I do. At the time, I was making the best of bad choices to you, and at other times in my life, it's been a problem for me.
You indicated that you were dissatisfied with your attorneys. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
You didn't trust your attorneys.
Are we talking about the attorneys today, or are we talking about Miss Mimi and Miss Balloon?
All of it.
No, sir, not completely.
You recall stating previously under oath that you had no complaints about Miss Ballou and that you were satisfied with her.
Was that during the same proceeding that I lied about no other deals?
The question is, do you recall saying that under oath?
I believe I said that under oath because I believe Miss Baloo went over that series of questions and told me how to answer them.
Now, Mr. Eustace brought out the fact that you have filed in excess of 100 pro se motions.
Yes.
But, so everyone's clear, some of those motions have been, for example, about getting a good night's sleep.
Yes, sir.
About getting clean underwear.
Yes. Actually, I believe it was so that I would be allowed to keep underwear.
Excuse me?
I believe it was, the motion was so that I would be allowed to keep underwear and underclothes.
Now, Mr. Eustace also talked about that your testimony now is that part of your confession didn't fit the trajectory of one of the bullets you fired towards Joe Weldon. Is that correct?
I think that part of my statement to you didn't fit at all
In fact,
with the trajectory of the rounds fired, including at least 3 that made holes on the left side of the house. Because I was standing, according to my statement to you, I was standing at basically the threshold the officer put in and firing from left to right, front to back, and that the physical evidence says that the trajectory was from right to left, from back to front. I got it
in
backwards.
fact, Mr. Meese, you explained that when you said that you stayed on the trigger as Joe Weldon went down, didn't you?
I fumbled that, and if you look at the casing data, there's no casings where that would be true. I fumbled that because I didn't expect it. I got it wrong.
You explained that as he was going down, you must have stayed on the trigger, an extra shot, didn't you? That's
That
what
was-
you said to us.
That's what I said, but it was a lie,
And-
because there's actually
You just
3 or
answered
4
my
holes
question.
there.
Judge, I'd ask the court to instruct the witness to answer the question.
Please answer the questions, Mr. Mays, please.
You explained to us that you must have stayed on the trigger while Joe Weldon was going down, didn't you?
I said something to that effect.
And that is also consistent with the testimony of Miss Dr. Jones regarding the graze wound to the back of his head, isn't it?
I don't believe it's consistent. I think that
You also told us,
Let him finish his answer. Are you done, Mr. Mays?
no, sir, I'm not.
Please finish your answer, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your question, Mr. Wright, was that if I had stayed on the trigger, that would have been consistent with Dr. Weekly Jones's testimony regarding the graze wound to his head.
yes,
My understanding of that testimony, especially regarding my statement, would be that the graze wound was when he was lying flat, and that if I had stayed on the trigger and had the weapon halfway, say for instance, halfway between my shoulders and my
demonstrate for the jury what you're doing there.
If he was on the ground and I stayed on the trigger and came around, which is how I tried to explain it to you in December, I could not have hit him with a graze wound going downward. And I would disagree with that. I don't believe that it's consistent with her testimony at all.
Now, the stance you just showed the jury, that's not your shooting stance, is it?
I've had a variety of shooting stances over the period of time that I've learned how to shoot.
During that time frame, demonstrate to the jury what your shooting stance was.
I think that Miss Felice talked about having my arm straight out and my elbow overextended and my wrist actually bent outward. I think that that's probably accurate, as she got to look as an uninterested observer at the time. She probably had a better view of my stance than I did, honestly.
So you think that's what you just demonstrated then would be your...
Well, what Miss Felice, I think, did a really good job at demonstrating.
I want you to demonstrate it for the jury.
Something to the effect of, she said something that my elbow was hyperextended and my left hand was out, and that I had a problem with.
And I'm not talking
moving
what
up
she
the-
said. I want you to demonstrate what your shooting stance was at that time.
I don't recall exactly what my shooting stance was at the time, but Katie Felice got to watch me, and I think that she was accurate about, at the time, what my shooting stance would have been.
So you would agree?
A year later? Yeah.
You would agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate.
On December 15th, in your confession, you said that you went down on the 24th to do what you called advance work, correct?
Yes, sir.
Tell the jury what you mean when you say advance work.
That's a term that I got out of spy novels, and probably something about the whole retribution for Munich. I think it was a novel. I can't remember on the short. I can't remember what it was, but it was a novel about how the Israelis retaliated from Munich, and they specifically called advance work doing research on the targets, on the people that they were going to assassinate as a result of the Munich massacre, and they called it advance work. And I pulled that term out of that book.
You said it was about information, key dates to be used, information to be used, foreknowledge of the environment, the killing site.
Yes, sir.
What is plausible deniability?
God bless Ronald Reagan. Plausible deniability is a term that I picked up as a child in the Reagan era, when Ronald Reagan and Admiral Poindexter, his national security advisor, and Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North were involved in the Iran-Contra affair, and I watched it on TV as a kid. And plausible deniability is the ability to deny involvement in some activity because you didn't know. As a matter of fact, I think that's a direct quote from Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North in his congressional testimony. Not sure if it's a direct quote or not.
A couple of things I want to ask you about, Mr. Meese. During your confession in November of 2004, you were asked a little bit about your involvement with Wicca. Can you tell a jury over what period of time and how much you were involved with Wicca?
I was never what I would call involved with Wicca. I had some knowledge when I was a teenager and was interested in it because of Dungeons and Dragons when I was a teenager. I was never an active practitioner of Wicca. Wiccan is a neo-pagan religion. It's based on the Irish and English pagans. And I don't recall exactly how I answered that question then, but
You recall saying that any occult involvement in these murders was entirely secondary to a financial gain motive. Recall saying that.
I recall saying that.
You also recall that you said the financial gain motive was for Meg for the estate and secondary for you for what Meg was supposed to pay you.
Yes, sir. It comes straight out of Discovery, as early as 1994 with Katie Fleece. Katie Fleece's report on the first page says that financial gain was the motive.
Part about being secondary for what Meg was supposed to pay you.
That
It came
was
from you, didn't it?
yeah, but it was just
It came from
nonsense.
you, didn't it?
It came from me, but it was nonsense.
And
Mr. Wright, the jury has been sitting for an hour and 30 minutes, and so has Mr. Meese, and I believe we should take another recess at this time. Give the jurors a chance to stretch, and to give the witness a chance to stretch. Remember the admonition I've given you, please. Don't discuss the case or form to express any opinion in it. And anything further as far as an admonition, Mr. Eustace or Mr. Wright?
no, sir.
Yes, sir.
I will take a 15-minute recess, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who smoke. All right, please be seated, ladies and gentlemen. You waive the call, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Wright, you may continue with your cross-examination of the witness.
Your Honor, that's all the questions I have, Mr. Meese, this time.
All right, redirect, Mr. Eustace.
One question. Lawyers never should say that. When you were talking about looking at the coroner's report, were you looking at the coroner's report or the autopsy?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand if they were different. Are they?
Yeah.
Okay,
The
it was.
autopsy is the one with the body.
Okay, I was looking at something in Discovery. I thought was the coroner's report. It might have been the autopsy. It was the report after the deaths,
Okay.
and I'm not sure if.
That's all the questions I have now. Oh, no, wait a minute. Sorry. That's it. I told you. Judge, I need you.
Said one. Now, go ahead, Mr. Eustace.
I think he's opened up the door for me to put in that fax.
Mr. Wright, please approach the bench. The question that Mr. Wright asked was not responded to. The answer was not responsive to the question. And Mr. Meese volunteered that.
Okay.
and it was not responsive to the question. I don't believe when you make an answer like that, it opens the door.
I think he opened the whole, there was a soliloquy about 4 or 5 back and forth questions and answers on regarding the fact.
I remember at the exact time that occurred, I can't remember exactly what was said, but I was anticipating
Uh-huh.
what you would do, and I may not reach an opinion at that time, and I'm going to prejudge, but I made an opinion at that time. It was not responsive to the question.
Well, then
I don't believe it was.
it would have been incumbent upon Mr. Wright to make a motion that that it was non-responsive, which he didn't do.
Well, I'm going to sustain the motion, the objection, or whatever. I'm not going to allow that to be introduced at this time.
Okay.
So
So,
you want to make an avowal later of Mr.
Right.
Rice. So why you, John?
well, I might get it in yet, but
Well, you said one question.
that's it. I'm still back to one. That's it.
Gentlemen, all right, if you please continue, Mr. Eustace.
I have nothing but that one question, Ron.
All right. And you have no further questions, Mr. Wright?
No, sir.
And Mr. Meese, you may go back to council table.
You,
Bill Meese was convicted of 3 counts of murder, robbery, and burglary. He was sentenced to death.